Tate is attending virtually and will be raising her hand in view of her webcam when requesting to speak. And before we get right into the meat and potatoes of everything, are there any disclosures of conflict of interest? Seeing none? Well, each department head will be making a presentation in the order outlined on the agenda. We will go through the budget booklet page by page, and council will be provided the opportunity to ask questions of staff. And with that, we'll start right into Karen Houston, Museum, pages 71 to 73 for those following at home. Welcome.
Thank you. Let's see if this goes up. Okay, I have it on my screen. It's not up on the monitor. Okay.
Joanne has to put that on the screen.
Understood.
For you.
Thank you.
So Joanne can do that.
Excellent. All right. So yes, as was just stated, we are going to be looking at 71 to 73 for the museum and 81 for the Market Center Theater. So to highlight some of the achievements, we'll start with the museum. We're going to go into more detail with these. So the 75th anniversary, the Sikhs in Canada 200 years exhibit, and two different events that we did this year. I did want to highlight the challenges this year. What just happened? What? Oh, sorry. Thank you. We're fine. I thought that was me. Okay, talking to challenges. Staffing. So the museum has always had a fairly small staff. There are 4 full-time people, including myself, and 2 part-time people. And this year, we had 1 full-time person who was off for 5.5 months due to injury. We had another full-time person who had long-term COVID, was able to come into work, but was part of the study for long COVID in London. So this did hamper what was some of they could do. One of the part-time staff left partway through the year, and the other part-time staff died. So this has been a bad year for us. So some of the things you're going to see in our actual budget are actually going to be things that happened or did not happen because of these staffing issues. But I want to talk about artifacts. That is why you have a museum. We actually accepted into the collection 277 artifacts. This is a lovely example of a Buster Brown wagon. Of course, Buster Brown made big wagons for actual farming, but they also made little ones for little boys. And so this one actually has the tag on the side showing that it was actually made here in Woodstock. And fortunately, we can actually house that. It's not so big that we can't. We also had over 13,000 people from our website go to the portal looking at the collection itself. So these are all of the researchers who are looking for photos and information about our objects as well. And on exhibit, we had 144 objects out this year in exhibit. So talking about the 75th, we had planned quite a few things actually for our 75th this year. We started out strong at the beginning in January with our tea that we were people dressed up from the era, and it was great fun. We had the exhibit about the curators who have worked at the museum, and then the plans for the summer did not come to fruition due to lack of staff. However, we were able to do our event in the fall, where it was a murder mystery through the museum, looking at some of the features of the building itself, and that was a hit as well. For the exhibits, I would like to thank the federal government. We did receive funding through COVID grants for MAP, and part of that was for the COVID stories, the local stories that we collected from the public. And when that was happening, it was also the Sikhs in Canada looking at 200 years. We got really good press for both of these exhibits and good turnout as well. Then there was Don't Smile, looking at historic portraits. And I'd like to thank Annandale Museum. They had some professional cameras, the large scale ones that they let us borrow for that exhibit, which was wonderful. And then lastly, we had the 50th anniversary for the Rug Hooking Guild, and that just came down. The last day was Family Day, so that was a hit as well. Pride, we did an escape room, and we're going to be doing another one this year for the event out in Museum Square. That worked out well. And Elf, wow, we didn't have a single booking not filled. I don't know, everybody loves Elf. There you go, it worked. Programming, we decided to try something slightly different this year. With adult programming, we're doing heritage skills workshops. So looking at things like rug hooking that were things that people did practically and now that they're doing for fun. Same with the egg dyeing. This year we're doing candle making, woodworking, these kinds of things. So partly to coordinate with our exhibits, but sometimes just looking at what are things that, how they used to do them versus how we do it today. Now, getting straight to the budget, I did make note of last year that we had gotten the 59,000, so that was for the exhibit and also for operating. That is no more, and we will not be getting that because COVID funding is not happening now. So you can see that the decrease in revenue is pretty much exclusively that grant. For the expenses, the full-time for the museum, there is an increase. That was because mid-year last year, I asked for a full-time custodian for the museum and theater, and so that is the portion of that for the museum. Also, the sick pay was a large amount because one staff was off for over 5 months, and then just the increase in utilities. Also, just as an aside, you'll notice that we didn't spend hardly anything on like professional development. That's because staff was either not in the building or couldn't leave the building. So that just didn't really happen. I wanted to highlight just quickly the Heritage and Museum Committees. I don't usually do this, but they did large events this year, so I wanted to highlight this. Doors Open is a provincial event, and it's done by the Ontario Heritage Trust. The committee actually found the 10 sites. They were volunteering at them. We had over 1,200 people at it, so it worked very well. The Spirit of Christmas, this was the home tour that the museum committee helped out and found volunteers for. Mark actually went around with me when we were looking for homes. It was helpful. And we sold 22 tickets. 33 of them were online. We have a new system now called Perfect Mind, so that in the future, we can actually use that program to sell tickets. We had to kind of scrounge around to find our own at that point. Ziffy, I think as it was called, and we sold 33 tickets in just like the last 2 weeks before the event. So it worked for the time we needed it to work. All right, now looking at the theater. Before COVID, we would routinely have 10 bookings a year. In 2023, we had 15 in what they consider their season from September to June. And the increase was causing part of the reason why we needed to increase from part-time to full-time cleaning. This year, just this spring into summer, we have 18 bookings, and we have 4 more that are tentative in the fall. Now, Little Theater, they have 180 days that they get to pick at the beginning of the year. And that's the contract that they actually have with the city. And that is given to us at the beginning of May. There are 4 groups that would like to book the site in the fall, but they can't until we have confirmation as to when the Little Theater is using it or not. The other thing is the Theatre Woodstock is doing more matinee shows, and this is a good thing, but it does mean that they need more cleaning because our contract states that we will clean in between each and every one of their shows. So just keeping that in mind. So expenses, you'll notice that there is an increase in full-time wages. That is for as it says, the conversion of the part-time to the full-time, but there is a reduction in the part-time wages. All right, additions to base budget. So with the clerk being off for a large portion of last year and other people not being around, I actually did that portion of her job for part of the year. And we need more help, putting it simply. The clerk has always had this as a corner of her desk, and it's getting to be more than that. And it's continuing to grow. So the ask is basically for this person to be looking at the 180 days or so that the Little Theater isn't in there. Let's get advertising, let's get more bodies into the building, but also they would be looking at renting the gallery when they get the 4th floor and the museum and the theater helping with special events. So that is what the emphasis is for this. And then lastly, the west end of the market center, at some point, parts of city staff are going to be moving into that end. There's going to need to be a cleaner, a custodian for that area, as well as the fact that when my custodian was not available, I reached out to City Hall and they were able to help out with that. Mary had the same experience trying to find somebody, because there's literally one person that we have on staff to do this. So this would also cover, vacations, sick time, anything of that nature, as well as the increased use of the theater itself. And that is the idea. All right, that is it for me. Any questions?
Excellent. Any questions of council? Councillor Schattenberg, this is before we get into line by lines. Or, I mean, we can do that as well if there's no other questions right now, just in general nature. Was it a line item? You got a question? Then we'll just see if there's anything just in general right now with the presentation. If not, then we'll start with pages 71 and 72 and 73. I guess it's kind of all jived together there. So, Councillor Schattenberg?
Yeah, from the mayor through to Karen. I noticed in the middle of the revenue section on page 71, museum donations is noted as being $2,000 for your budget for last year, and then you attained just over 3,000, but you're back to 2,000 for possible revenue for this year. Where exactly are the donations? Is that money in lieu of charging admission?
Your worship, through to the question, yes, that is part of that. And we can raise it to 3. There isn't any reason we can't. We do now have the ability to take donations just at the desk. And yes, we have a donation box as well. So in the past, it was strictly the donation box that you could do it through. Now, increasingly, people are just doing it at the door and giving us that way. So if you would like it increased to 3, we can. I'm always conservative, both with the numbers of how much I spend and how much I put in. I will agree.
Conservative is okay. Any other questions? Councillor Leatherborough?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for your presentation. On page 72, under 83710-0315 museum advertising,
Yes.
budgeted for 20,000, year to date is just under 15,000. So I'm curious if the additional events coordinator was approved, and you spoke about advertising. Would this advertising all happen within this budget line, I guess is my question.
Your worship, through to the question. I think some of it could, but I think that we could also have an advertising line in the market center as well. And then that would be a good place to put that, because if that's where we're trying to get more rentals, but yes, either place.
Any other questions for pages 71 to 73? Concentrate on the museum first. That's okay. Yep. Seeing none, then we will just jump ahead to 81, and I believe that goes into 82, if memory serves me correct. Yes, kind of. So 81 and 82 for the Market Theater. Any questions of that? Seeing none? All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next up, we have Economic Development. Len Magar. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship.
And for those watching at home, 86 to 89 is what we're going to be on next.
All right, so now it's on the screen. So as mentioned, this is the presentation from the Economic Development Department. So the staff from the various divisions are here, so they'll do their own little presentation. So if you have specific questions for them, as much as I'm the department head, they're probably much more capable of answering specifics than I am. So I'll just lay that out there. In terms of our department, our key services are business retention and business attraction. Those are probably the two things that we're largely known for. On the business retention side, this is something we do on a regular basis. We typically visit with about a dozen to 14 companies a year. We also have a lot of interactions with our local businesses through obviously Chamber of Commerce, advising them of various assistance programs, that sort of thing, as well as occasionally we do seminars as well that are of interest to local businesses. On the business attraction side, Japan and other international missions, trade shows and conferences. Again, key services, industrial land sales. We have in the budget this year projected about $25 million in land sales, industrial land sales. We're working through the film attraction program. Last year, we spent a fair amount of our time developing our inventory of shots for film location scouts. This year, we're going to put that a little more into action in terms of directly reaching out to people in that industry. We also handle sale of other municipal properties. The bigger ones this year, 760 Juliana Drive, the former PUC building, which closes next week. And of course, Carrie handles downtown development. Christy handles our physician recruitment programming, and Sean McNamara and Brenda Tate run the small business center. In terms of upcoming projects and challenges, this year we have our 2024 FAM tour. So we do this as part of our Oxford Connection group. And this is where we invite a number of site selectors, industrial realtors into the community, and we show them what the community is about. We show them some investment opportunities, that sort of thing. This is probably, for a lot of the programming we do, this is probably one of the things we get our best bang for our buck out of. There's been a number of deals done over the years from people who have met each other on the Oxford Connection tour. So realtors doing deals directly with each other in Oxford County. But also there are typically those industrial realtors who come back to us when we're selling industrial land, which is very evident with the Allier Farm. Oxford County Career Fair, this is something that both Brad and I are pretty involved in with Natalie Surridge from Canadian Employment Services. So there's a big event at the fairgrounds, March 21st of this year. So there's a lot going into preparing that. There's currently, I think, about 120 local businesses who are signed up, largely manufacturers who are going to be at that event, and working with school boards and also be advertising to the general public to get them to come out to that event. And I mentioned SOMA. I think most of council is aware of our SOMA participation. This year we've actually entered into it's a pretty unique opportunity with the London Economic Development Corporation. So the LEDC, as they're called, have applied for $300,000 for funding for programming directly related to going after Volkswagen-related suppliers because of the investment in St. Thomas. So we're working on our planning for this year, which is going to involve going to what they call the IZB show, which is a show directly for Volkswagen-related suppliers. We have a consultant who's been hired who will do a bit of a road show also with potential suppliers for us. And at the moment, we don't have a lot of details, but at the moment we're looking at inviting a number of those potential suppliers into our area so they can see the community. So there'll be kind of a couple steps to that program. In terms of upcoming challenges, as much as we're having tremendous success on the industrial land sales side, it does mean that we're largely going to be out of the industrial land market for about 3 years. So our land sales will fall probably close to zero, which is a good news, bad news story, because obviously there'll be lots of construction this year and probably early next spring as well. But the challenge that it's creating now is we have to rely on the private sector. So when we're dealing with clients, we can take them to a certain point, and then we have to largely turn them over to a private sector owner of land who hopefully is motivated the same way we are, but quite often they have different aspirations. So it's a bit of a challenge, but it certainly can be done. In terms of partnerships, I mentioned SOMA, but there's Oxford Connection, as mentioned, the FAM Tour. We're looking at 2 to 3 trade shows this year. Typically, those shows are national, so they're within Canada. I'll mention SOMA, which is at the bottom, in the bottom bullet there first. So SOMA, because we're members of SOMA, we also belong to the Ontario Manufacturing Communities Alliance, which is doing 3 to 4 international trade shows this year, and the Ontario Food Cluster, which is also doing 3 to 4 international trade shows this year. SOMA typically sends somebody to all those shows. One of the benefits, of course, of SOMA is that neither Brad nor I have to go to all those specific shows. All the leads are shared. So it saves us a significant amount of time in terms of actually being here to do the day-to-day job. SOMA, I should mention, is looking at about 5 international trade shows this year. We do some activities with Society of Industrial and Office Realtors. So you notice some of these things build on what we do with Oxford Connection. So the FAM Tour, we invite industrial office realtors to the FAM Tour to learn about our area. But then through SOMA, we also do things with industrial and office realtors, again, just to continue to get our name in front of them. And then Site Selectors Guild, this is an event actually being held in the States in about 5 weeks. And it is people who are in the site selection business. So they're working on behalf of companies directly, looking for sites. And we've got some pretty good profile with some of the site selectors. There's more and more people getting in the site selection business. So we're always trying to meet what I would call the newbies in the business. But there are some really established firms that we continue to meet with to talk about our area, the benefits of being in our area. So in terms of budget, I just only listed some of the major department or major line changes. Land sales, as I mentioned, is up about $5 million to $25 million for this year. Trade shows, we've dropped to $17,000. The proposed budget of $170 million is not correct there, by the way. That'd be an awful lot of traveling. And then cost related to land sales is up about $655,000. Again, a good news story, because that's largely commissions that we're paying on sales for Allier, and the filming location expenses is going down about $5,000 from last year. This gives a pretty good visual of what's happening in the industrial land market. So you can kind of see over the last number of years where we've gone. And of course, 2024 is going to be a phenomenal year for the city of Woodstock, both in terms of total acreage sold and also the value of land sales as well. So that's it for my presentation. I was told to be shorter than Brad Hammond from last year. I don't mean shorter. I mean, yeah.
You said it, not me.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. So on the community improvement plan, you'll notice in the additions to base budget, there's a $50,000 item for, it's basically a place marker because we're reviewing the CIP and we'll be coming back to council. I think we were hoping as early as spring, but it's probably going to be more in the May or June timeframe to look at some changes to CIP that might help with affordable housing programs. So we've actually just within the last couple of weeks started looking at some brownfield programming options as well. So that'll be part of the CIP, but we'll be coming back to council where council will be able to decide kind of the final number they want to put to it. But as I say, the $50,000 is there as a place marker, just because we're given direction from council to actually go back and look at the CIP.
I'm glad you brought that up because that's quite important.
I forgot to mention it when I mentioned
That's why you have
CIP.
Brad here.
Yeah, exactly.
Any questions of Mr. Mager before we get into specific line items? Councillor Schanberg?
Yeah, this time it is a question about the report. Question from Mayor to Mr. Magyar. You mentioned the Allier farm quite a couple times in your presentation. Is it safe to assume then that Griffin Way is completely sold out?
Your worship, through to the question, yes, Griffin Way is pretty much gone. We may have some properties coming back to municipality that we can put back on the market. So that's pretty much gone. And then, of course, Allier is pretty much sold out. There's a little bit of movement and two different offers where the actual line might finish up being, but that pretty much puts us out of industrial land.
Thank you. Any other questions on this presentation? Okay, seeing none, then we'll get into lines. Start with, are you going to be standing there for
I
all of them?
I won't stand here for all of them, but I will do mine if there are questions specific about development,
All right.
because I know there's
we'll,
other members of the department have
course,
presentations as
yeah.
well. So
Yeah, as well.
you want to?
Just do all the presentations. Yeah, I think maybe that's what we'll do. Why don't we welcome up Carrie Jarvie. Ms. Jarvie's up next, and then that's what we'll do if that's okay with council. We'll welcome everybody up, ask specific questions, then we'll go through the lines. Okay? Ms. Jarvie, welcome.
Thank you. Staring at the end of one's presentation. Just waiting for Joe. It's not up here, so I can't
No.
select from it, so I see her moving.
Okay. Was saying we should have hockey music in between, right? Keep the excitement level up instead of the delays. I'm getting thumbs up from the back here.
I'm done. My presentation, questions, welcome. You don't want me to sing at all. No. Throw some 90s club tunes in maybe. Hey.
We know Dan's a singer. Maybe he'll belt out a tune for us right now, no?
Want me to not touch me?
And Diane, of course. There you go. Can't forget the two of you together. Fantastic.
Yay.
You missed your chance to sing at council. Just saying. Ms. Jarvie, go ahead. Thank you.
All right. Good evening, your worship and members of council. I'm Carrie Jarvie. I am the Downtown Development Officer. Key services that are provided by your Downtown Development Officer is new business attraction for downtown, business retention and expansion, promotion and marketing of downtown, assisting property owners with facade suggestions and following the facade guidelines that have been approved, coordinating the efforts of the business improvement area, managing the community improvement program with grants and loans, and participate in the streetscape planning. I think one of the key achievements this year was cleaning up the community improvement program. So we were fortunate to get them all done. Some that were hanging on since 2016, I believe, was the oldest one. So making sure that people had done all of their work. So that was very exciting achievement. 2024 priorities is to focus on recruitment. A marketing plan was done by 360 Collective that has given us targeted sectors that we can focus on to recruit new businesses to downtown. Advancing marketing initiatives through the business improvement area, expanded partnerships with Tourism Oxford, the Woodstock Chamber of Commerce, and the Canada's Outdoor Farm Show. Great markets, the people doing really great things that we can really do a lot more with. Increased cooperation with commercial realtors to help fill vacancies and being able to track more where people are coming from and what they're interested in and why they may not have picked a building or a certain spot. Grant applications is what I'm doing a lot of right now to offset the cost of downtown initiatives. And we have the committee that approves community improvement programs to bring to you have worked to set intake deadlines. So it will be a very nice structured process going forward, optimistically. One clarification is that I'm not a staff of the Downtown Woodstock BIA. I'm actually a coordinator, and I am the city's contact for the BIA. So I do manage a lot of their business affairs due to the fact that their business affairs are managed by the Treasury Department. So I am the city contact. It's also easier for works to be contacted by one person instead of being contacted by multiple facets. Really excited to be able to assist the business improvement area with some strategic planning and some visioning. They have an excellent part-time operations manager, Dwayne Kamala Thomas, who is doing an exceptional job, and a really great board with some new board members. So it's really been exciting to see really a great cohesion there. They've worked on it. This is their vision and their directive that they came up with, which I think is really speaks to what our downtown should be. And I think they did a really great job. And so I'm working with them. So the visioning exercise was completed. We've really improved engagement with the businesses. We've done postcards, we've done mailers, we're doing regular newsletters. Working with them on redoing their procedural bylaws, and have hosted some really successful events. Street Fest was just a knockout. It was really, really fun. And I think the businesses really had a great time. And the Woodstock shopping nights, they're expanding. They've taken it from a grassroots one night, a couple of months a year, to now that is 12 months out of the year. Not focusing too much on my budget because I'm only one little section of one little page, but this is, we really don't have many changes. The website is the biggest decrease for the fact that that's changed. One of the great things is that I didn't utilize my advertising budget to its potential in 2023, but with the coordinated efforts and a lot more of the initiatives of being able to have a structured recruitment plan, it will have the ability to utilize advertising dollars this year. Are there any questions?
Excellent. Any questions of council? Again, just on the presentation right now, before we get into line items. I'd just like to say that I really enjoyed the BIA Town Hall meeting. That
Great.
was excellent, and I've heard a lot of great things from community on that, and thank you
Great.
for your assistance with helping with all that as well.
Thank you.
Seeing none? No, I think that's it.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much. Next up, we'll ask Sean McNamara for Small Business Center.
Oh, great. It's ready for me.
And for those just
Age
watching at home,
dictates that I bring my cheaters up. I think I can read off of there, but I can't read off of
I
here,
gave up
so.
and just wear them all the time now, so.
Yeah, your worship, council and staff, thank you for allowing me to present our 2024 budget presentation that was there and is no longer. There it is. To give you some idea of our 2023 year end, we engaged 690 unique clients, supported 341 existing and or conceptual businesses, and assisted 49 actual business startups or expansions. We conducted just shy of 2,000 new or repeat in-person or remote meetings, consultations, or engagements. And each client interaction between 5 minutes and 30 minutes is considered an engagement. So that's how we track that. We have to give these KPIs to the ministry that funds most of our budget. So again, this is how we track things. I've broken it down by municipality for the purposes of this presentation. 44% of the clients that we did meet with this year were from the Woodstock, were considered Woodstock, and the rest of the municipalities are broken out. I thought it might be helpful, further demographic breakdowns for our clients in the past year. We've identified, again, without asking, so we identify as best we can, 62% of our client base is female, 28 being male. The average age is approximately 36, and an increasing number for our center, about approximately 22% of our clients are new to Canada or at least new to Oxford County. We've also continued with our Starter Company Plus grant program, which is issued through the province of Ontario. Most of you are familiar with this, but it provides a $5,000 grant to qualifying recipients. And we had 12 recipients this year, and we gave away 60,000 in grants. They went through the program, they went through the presentations, and were subsequently awarded that. So again, across the county, that was very, very helpful, and we're very proud to be able to give those grants away. Typically, we would normally give away 9 grants. We have another grant that I'll speak to in a minute called our Summer Company Grant for students. We normally have 6 allocated for those students. Regrettably, in spite of our very strong engagement, both Brenda Tate and myself were very active in the community. We only had 1 Summer Company Grant recipient this year. We are already gearing up in 2024 to have that community engagement and exposure at the student level. We're going back to most of the schools, and we're participating in trade shows and trade fairs within the schools, and we're hoping to see that number come up. But the reason I mentioned that now is that where we would normally have 9 Starter Company Plus grants, the ministry allowed us to move some of the money that was not used on the Summer Company side over to the Starter Company side, resulting in the 12 grants that you see there. Some of the grant recipients, just for information purposes, are shown here. Pretty healthy mix, all 12 represented across the county. There's our Summer Company Grant, as mentioned. 15,000 up front. It is a compressed period of time, starts in May, ends in August. Obviously, with a student grant program, the students have to go back to school. So we need to compress it into that period of time. And upon successful completion, the students receive $3,000. This year, that says Summer Company Grant is Jacob Britnell. BlueWorks 3D printing services. And in 2023, in his time operating in our program, his revenue generated was about $7,100. So we're very proud. And for a student, that's an exceptional number considering the compressed time frame. We continue to have very strong relationships with our community partners. I would say that they've never been stronger, or certainly haven't been stronger in the last number of years than they are now. We have strong connections with 5 municipal chambers of commerce, the 4 Oxford County BIA associations, strong relations with Community Futures, Rural Oxford Economic Development, Community Employment Services, Tourism Oxford, and Fanshawe. And we speak to these supporting partners on an ongoing weekly basis, so we're very proud of that. Our community engagement continues. Our SBC Live program, which Brenda Tate is in charge of, it's weekly community outreach. We're expanding relationships with Oxford County small businesses. These are on-site visits, 1 or 2 days a week, every week of the year. We work with community partners and municipalities to address specific needs. And this year, we were able to engage 234 businesses visited and connections established. Now, these are people who effectively, in some cases, this is a cold call. This is just us going and allowing businesses to know that we're here as a service to them. We're here to support in any way that we can. There may be no engagement to start. It may just be a simple conversation. In other cases, it could be a very involved engagement or an ongoing growth of relationship. But one of the things that we did find through COVID was that a lot of small business owners felt that they were isolated and alone. So our engagement motto continues to be, you are not alone, make us your first call. In 2023, we had our Bridges to Better Business event with Michael Pinball Clements. A number of councillors were in attendance. It was a great success. However, As we move forward, and some on council will be aware of this, somebody very close to me, my wife, mentioned the Bridges to Better Business is an excellent event, but how is it helping the average small business owner who cannot leave work, cannot come to the event because they have to man the shop, they have to be there, they're accountable to the bottom line. And so by having it during the day, having a cost associated with it is very, very good. But as we look around the room at events like Bridges, as they've been the past few years, we aren't meeting the needs of the people that we are mandated to help and support. So moving forward in 2024, we're going to change the way that we do Bridges to Better Business. We're going to convert it to a large networking with purpose initiative. And networking with purpose is sort of like speed dating. It's where we bring all of our small business entrepreneurs, current owners, people looking to expand, and we bring them together with municipal leaders, industry-specific professionals, and other people that we feel would be beneficial. We bring them all together under one roof, and we mix everyone together. And unlike a regular mix and mingle, we assign people team designations. You pair off in your teams, you pitch one another, then we mix the teams, with the concept being that if 50 people attend our Bridges event, if you as an individual attended it, at the end of the night, you'll have spoken to 49 other people. It's much more impactful. If we hold it in the evening and we don't charge for it, then more people are able to come. It frees up time and it puts people into the same spaces as other business owners, as politicians, as professionals, and it tends to be much more impactful. So that's where we see our Bridges to Better Business moving forward. We're there to serve the clients. So we feel that this addresses that much better than, as nice as it's been, having a keynote speaker come in and speak to people who already know who we are and who already are benefiting from being business owners, understanding what maybe those independent business owners don't have yet. Innovation for 2024. In July of 2023, the Oxford Small Business Center was recognized for our innovation and support of small business, as we were visited by Clara Chan, Deputy Minister for Small Business and Program Delivery. And we were one of a handful of small business centers in Ontario who were recognized as excelling at program delivery, engagement, and innovation. As a result, the Oxford SBC is now even stronger, or we have an even stronger working relationship with the province, and we have a mandate to work together to develop a new small business program. In 2023, we were asked by a number of economic development entities within Oxford to help owners of longstanding legacy businesses who were looking to sell or shutter their businesses. How do they perpetuate what it is that they have? It's very important to them. Those legacy businesses have grown over 20, 30, 40 years, and they don't want to just close their doors and be done. So we worked with a number of them with great success to develop succession planning, which is something that from a provincial level, the ministry hasn't developed yet. So in recognition of that work with the Deputy Minister, we've now been asked to develop some of that programming. So the succession support garnered through our SBC got us recognition with the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade. And in this 2024 year, we're being asked by the province of Ontario to develop a province-wide program to assist Ontario business owners with a path forward towards succession. So we're very, very proud of that. To finalize my presentation, I think a lot of people on council have some idea, but they're not 100% sure what it is, how we're funded, and how things work. And so this pie chart sort of gives you a better idea of where our funding comes from. So specific to the funding for the 2024 budget, you'll see that 55% comes from the province, 14% from the county, 31% from the city of Woodstock. It's also worth noting that our provincial budget runs different than the calendar budget of the city of Woodstock, meaning that we run from the 1st of April to March the 31st. So there is some crossover there, So 3 months do carry over into the next year. But again, those numbers are represented annualized as a whole in the budget and in the presentation. So again, it's really more confusing at our end sometimes than it is for the purposes of presentation. But again, so everyone knows, we operate on a 2+1 year contract. The +1 year of our contract starts April of 2024. We've been told that there will be no changes to our funding structure for that +1 year, which we're very happy for. So that allows us the confidence of knowing that we can move forward into the 2024 year. And that's my presentation.
Any questions on the presentation itself? Again, before we get into light items. Yes, seeing none. Little disappointed with the Bridges Better Business. That's always been great, but I love, I'll say, great job. I think you're right on the money there. I think to look at your clients and that change is smart. So good on everybody. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Next up, we'll have Christy Hans, our physician recruitment. Oh, wow. It's a long day already. Anyways.
So I'm Christy Hans, the physician recruiter. I'm going to jump right into the proposed recruitment budget for 2024. So I've highlighted a couple of areas here. The first one is career fairs and travel. As you can see, there's an increase here versus last year. So on the next slide, I'm going to explain why that is. There's also an addition to base budget, a program called academic supports. So later in the presentation, I'm going to outline those programs. After we talk about the numbers, then I'm going to speak about some of the challenges with physician. Oh, now I'm doing it. Physician recruitment, as well as look at the recruitment needs in Woodstock. One final item I want to point out here, while it does look like there's a decrease in the provision for forgivable loan from 90 to 30, we've actually been allocating 30,000 to that program over the last 3 years. And that's so that funds are available in anticipation of program approval later this year. That, of course, will be a separate report and presentation to council at that time. But my understanding, the 90 is shown in the operating statement. That's 30. That was 30,000 from last year, as well as 60 that had accrued in previous years. And the total of 90 was moved from the reserve fund into this provision account so that it's automatically rolled over at the end of the year. Okay, so first we're going to talk about why the increase in career fairs and travel. And that comes from a new initiative called SOPRA. SOPRA, or the Southern Ontario Physician Recruitment Alliance, is a large group of recruiters in Southern Ontario who are working together to recruit internationally. So this includes targeting both physicians that are already practicing in other countries, as well as recruiting Canadians who are studying abroad. Since last spring, there has been an increased focus on international recruitment, and that's largely because at that time, the CPSO, or the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, relaxed their licensing requirements for physicians that were trained in certain jurisdictions, namely the UK, the US, Ireland, and Australia. The other reason we're seeing more international recruitment is there simply aren't enough Canadian trained physicians to meet the demand. So in Ontario right now, it's estimated there are about 2.2 million people without a family doctor, and that number is expected to double over the next 2 years. So my involvement with this organization, my membership fees, and the associated travel costs are responsible for the increase in the career fairs and travel. So most of my leads as a recruiter come from one of these sources. We're now moving on to the addition to base budget. So looking at the academic supports programs. These funds, if approved, would be used to identify more local candidates, as well as to increase the number of medical students and residents that we have completing a portion of their training here in Woodstock. So there's two components to academic supports, the first being student scholarships. In order to identify local individuals who are already training to become physicians, I'm proposing that the City of Woodstock award 5 med student scholarships annually at a value of $1,000 each. This will not only identify those individuals, but it will allow me to establish relationships with them and stay in touch with them throughout their training. It's also an opportunity, of course, to showcase and promote the practice opportunities that we have in Woodstock and that are available to them upon completion of their training. The second component to academic supports is teaching stipends. So we have a number of physicians in Woodstock, current physicians who have a faculty appointment with Western or another Ontario university. When those physicians take students, take them and train them and teach them, usually for a month at a time, they receive a stipend, a teaching stipend from that student's university. However, in other circumstances, we're receiving more requests, usually from international students. So quite often it's someone from Oxford County. They grew up here, but they're now in med school in Ireland, for example. They're looking to come back closer to home to do some of their training in Woodstock, be, like I said, closer to home and gain some experience in the Canadian healthcare system versus in Ireland, maybe where they're going to school full time. So in these cases, where a stipend is not provided by a university, I'm proposing that the City of Woodstock provide the equivalent stipend as is done in many other community recruitment programs such as Trenton, Sarnia, etc. Okay, so this is a survey from 2021, and we're going into some of the challenges of recruitment here. So you can see that the surveyed family medicine residents, only 15% of them planned on starting or taking over a family practice. It's important to note here, because I think we all know that after medical school, some physicians are going to choose to specialize, go into things like cardiology, surgery, obstetrics, etc. That is not what is happening with the 85% here. Those people were not part of this survey. This is specifically looking at people who are already in a family medicine residency training program, and only 15% of them want to have their own practice. So obviously a large challenge. Right. This is, I think I've said this before, but this part of the problem is I often say that Woodstock is not unattractive to physicians. I have people contact me interested in working at the hospital, for example, in Emerge as a hospitalist. Unfortunately, family medicine has become, or family practice has become unattractive to physicians everywhere. And I think the other important thing to note is this study was about 2.5 years ago, and if it were repeated in 2024, I wouldn't be surprised if that number was actually lower than 15%, especially given some of the headlines like this one. This was just 2 days ago in the Toronto Star, and it's a group of family physicians who are warning their colleagues, residents graduating from training programs against starting a family practice. Okay, so we see there's not very many people that are looking to do family practice, not many graduating physicians. Of the few that do want a family practice, almost all of them want to operate under the FHO or Family Health Organization model. This is what almost all of our physicians currently practice under in Woodstock. And so until this time, we've had physicians that maybe they practice on their own. You might go see your doctor and he's in a building all on his own, but he is likely part of one of these groups that provides shared after-hours coverage. So the Ministry of Health, as of last year, said that for established physicians in their own office, they may carry on practicing in that manner. However, if we have a physician who's interested in coming to Woodstock and they would like to join an FHO, they now have to practice at one of the existing clinic sites. So this is challenging because most of our offices, almost all of them, have no space for additional physicians. There's maybe one exception to that. There is room, but they would need to do some construction and build some more exam rooms. So The ministry said if that can't happen, you can start a new clinic site, but then you have to have 3 physicians at that site. So that means you have to find 3 instead of 1 who all want to work together, all want to start at the same time. And you need a bigger clinic space. So we do have a couple pharmacies in town, maybe have 2 or 3 exam rooms, but I don't see how you would fit more than 1 or 2 physicians in them, so. I get asked all the time how many physicians we need in Woodstock. So this is my best estimate based on the best available data from the Ministry of Health. Unfortunately, this data, it shows health card holders that are living in Woodstock that are rostered to a physician anywhere in the province. So we can't tell here if someone's living here, but they're still with their doctor in Toronto because they can't get one locally. So not ideal, of course. This suggests 7 to 8 new physicians are required. I tried looking at the data a different way. This data has its own challenges, but it would suggest 4 to 5 physicians are needed, so slightly better. I'm not sure what the exact number is, maybe somewhere in between these figures. I think the point is that I obviously have my work cut out for me, no matter which set of data you look at. And then finally, again, data from the Ministry of Health. This data shows that of our current physicians, 40% of them are age 60 or older. So I put this in here to show that we also have significant retirement risk over the next 5 to 10 years. That's it. Thank you everyone for your time. Thank you to council for considering my budget proposal, and I'm happy to take questions.
Before I open it up, I just want to thank you again for those at home and for council. Ms. Hans came during Roma and did a fantastic presentation to Minister Jones, talking about these exact same concerns. So I know for a fact the minister has heard it, and I just want to say thank you again for that, because I was quite educated at that time during that.
Thank you. And you did remind me of something I forgot to say in my presentation. When looking at the stat on how few graduating physicians want to have their own family practice, it's frustrating when the Minister of Health says the provincial government is increasing residency spots. Well, that's all fine and good, but the problem is the people that are taking those spots, by the time they're finished their training, they don't actually want to have a family practice. Thanks.
Yeah, it was educational to say the least
Mm.
when I sat there. So now I'll open it up to council. Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Mayor Accioni. I appreciate the opportunity. You mentioned just in your final comments about retirement risk, and that the age of our average age of existing doctors is 60, I think you said, 60 to 65.
According to the Ministry of Health data, and I don't know everyone's age in Woodstock, so I'm going off this data, but according to them, 40% of current physicians are age 60 or older.
Okay. Does that then also, and I like to be the optimist, does that create an opportunity? Because in attracting, if medical professionals can't get into an FHO and they need to set up with 2 or 3 others, does retirement actually open up spaces within existing practices and potentially multiple spaces? Because a lot of doctors aren't necessarily wanting full-time, 7 days a week, right? A lot of doctors are looking at quality of life and looking at shared practices, shared hours. Does it create an opportunity for us?
So in one sense, retirements are generally easier to fill. Someone that can walk into a practice, assuming it's well managed and everything. And so those are easier to fill. But we also, because Woodstock's grown so much, I'm not sure that it makes it any easier to recruit new physicians that are willing to start from the ground up. With starting from patient 0 and all the way up. It's a long process to get fully rostered, and there's just a lot more work at the start when you're doing meet and greets with every patient. So yeah, not many people are looking to do that. Like I said, the retirements are easier, but still once you have that practice, you have it, and no one's looking to jump into that these days, so.
Follow up then. For a budget of $250,000, what successes have we seen? And yeah, how can, so for $250,000, is it better to build a facility or put resources into a facility that's ready for 3 doctors to move into, or is it better to try and do one-off recruitments? Are you seeing more success in one-off recruitments or group recruitments?
I would love to see a facility. I mean, the challenge then, and a lot of smaller communities, I think a lot smaller than Woodstock are doing that, where they fully fund the clinic or heavily subsidize it. But these are smaller communities, and then they put all of their doctors in that building. It's hard to do that here equitably. I wouldn't want to turn away any of our current doctors that don't have any support either, and some of which might be struggling as well. So I like the idea. I would love to, because they're in a fixed income model, right? They cannot increase their income. They can't bill the government anymore, but their overhead is going up. This year, there's a 0% increase. Overhead's going up. Their own cost of living is going up. They're paying their staff more. So a lot of people are saying it's a failed business model. And I'm worried we will not only, it's obviously already hard to find people to start this. I'm worried we might see people walk away from practices, not because of retirement, but just to do something else.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? I know it's something we talk about at my house even quite often. My wife hasn't had her doctor since her doctor retired, so it's been very difficult. And one of the most common things I hear from residents when we get talking about things and just living in Woodstock is them having to go to other cities to go back to their original doctors. And so this is a big concern. So thank you for your efforts. Please continue. Yeah. And I guess that's it. At this point, then we'll open up our books and we'll start going through page by page, and we'll ask the corresponding person to come forward to answer the question if needed. If Len's not the right one, we'll ask you to come forward if that's okay with council. We're again going to be between pages 86 and 89. So let's take 86 and 87 right now. Any questions on either one of those pages? Seeing none, we'll move along. 88 and 89. Seeing none, and we're going to go to the Small Business Center at pages 90 and 91. Seeing none, moving along. I guess just follow along. Physician recruitment, 87, 88. We passed that. There was no questions. I think that's it for this section. Before we move along, any other final opportunity from council? Before we hear from IT or Mr. Curry on behalf of IT. Okay, moving along. So next up, as mentioned, Mr. Creary is here on behalf of our information technology, and those are on pages 14 and 15. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just while we're waiting for the presentation to, there it is. So thank you, Your Worship, members of council. I am here on behalf of Mr. Grattan, your Chief Information Officer, Director of Information Technology, who couldn't be here tonight. I've been led to believe that he has met with council individually and addressed all the questions, and that's the pretense under which I'm here. So let's get that. Oh, and it's even got animation. Okay, so this is Mr. Grattan's prepared presentation. So 2023 in review. Several investments made in 2023, technology, software training, standardization. just to further enhance the vision of enabling the city of Woodstock with secure platform and technology. Example of some of the improvements made in 2023 is fiber connectivity to a number of our new facilities. $110,000 project last year was completed in that regard. There's been ongoing work and investments to add additional security layering to our network. We've improved our controlled network access. We've layered security. We've introduced security controls to mobile devices. And we all witnessed that in action on Tuesday evening. Looking forward into 2024, there are a number of areas that are ongoing efforts for the department. Oops, wrong page. So key focus areas: process automation, consolidation of data to allow secure ease of access. That's a lot of technological words for wanting to develop an intranet system that's accessible to staff and council as a data repository. Collaboration through software suites. This is representative of the introduction of Teams and Microsoft Office 365 applications, and the capabilities of sharing documents electronically and broadly internally. Teams has quickly become a major tool for communication amongst ourselves. There's been enhancements in the asset lifecycle management, expansion of asset management to the peripherals, to the smaller pieces of IT, not just the primary computing devices. Change management, essentially documentation and tracking of all of the changes to the network architecture. Finally, resource allocation to support the library, and that's what we'll talk about next. This is introduced as one of the additions to base budget. There are two requests for full-time employees within the information technology department, both identified as service desk analysts or IT interns, entry-level positions. The first one is requested at an 8-month term for 2024, so hired earlier in the year. And this first one would be to support the assistance of the library with IT supports. So in 2023, the IT contracted services supporting the library served notice of the end of the contract. So this triggered a discussion between the chief librarian and city staff about potential partnerships of extending our IT resources to support the library needs. And out of this is a recommendation for a transfer of one of our current IT resources, 70% of one of our IT resources to the library, which creates a gap within that department to be filled with a service desk analyst or an intern for an 8-month student. So that particular recommended addition to base budget would actually reduce the IT budget by $25,000 this year, but it would increase the library budget by $65,000 for a net overall increase of $40,000 for 2024. For 2025, the annualized cost would be approximately $71,500 above current budget. Now, there's a second IT intern that's being requested. It is a 6-month request, hired mid-year with an estimated cost of $45,800 with an annualized estimate of $91,500. The additional IT intern is intended to alleviate significant overtime hours that are currently being performed by the IT staff. I think in 2023, there was a sharp uptick in unremunerated overtime hours by IT staff. It was something north of 700 hours. And again, we witnessed it on Tuesday evening with a call for service to respond to a situation. That's not uncommon, and it happens at all hours of day, night, weekends. And so it is a request to address a current resource issue within the department. And with that, Your Worship, I'll just take any questions.
Excellent. Any questions? Again, in general, before we get into pages. Again, I agree. Mr. Grattan sat, I think, with virtually everybody that wanted to sit down. So let's jump into pages 14 and 15. Any questions of council? Seeing none. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Worship.
And before we jump forward, I'm gonna guesstimate we're probably about halfway through. Does anybody require a break? Or do we wanna push through? Okay. Harold, you're up. So now, of course, we're into engineering department. Mr. DeHaan, welcome.
Good evening. Mayor and councilors, I'm here to present the 2024 budget for the engineering department. The engineering department is made up of the building department, engineering, bylaw, parking, transit, and paratransit. The first department we're going to talk about is the building department 0301, 2023 year in review. We currently have 4 building inspectors and 2 building technicians in the department. You may say that, why is that a big deal? Well, it's the first time we've actually had a full complement in a number of years due to a number of different circumstances. Construction value for last year, you may remember from a report to council a couple of weeks ago or a couple of meetings ago, the construction value was 280 million versus a value of 199 million the year before in 2022. And although the construction value was up, the number of residential units was down from 763 permits in 2022 to 600 last year. Objectives for 2024. These would be objectives that are outside of any additions to base budget that council may approve. We're hoping to complete the conversion to of Amanda files into cloud permit. We introduced the cloud permit as an addition to base budget last year. We are now have it up and running. All new permits are going through cloud permit. We just need to pull the old permits that were done in the Amanda system into the cloud permit so that we have that data electronically also, and we don't have to use 2 different sets of. So everything is available through one system. And contrary to what I just said, I know we said we had a full complement. By the end of this year, we won't have a full complement. So we'll have a maternity leave to fill. Brief overview, of the building department numbers. Permits, 2023, we had 847,000. 2024, we're predicting $1 million, which is an increase of 153 or 18.1%. Other funds to make up the revenue, basically contributions from the reserve. As you know, the building department by provincial law is a zero-sum budget. So whatever we spend, we have to basically zero out at the end of the year. So if we spend more than we make, we had to pull from the reserves. Right now, the way the budget stands, we're predicting pulling out 198 from the reserves, which would be about 38% less than we predicted last year. In terms of expenditures, which would be full-time wages and vehicles and everything else. In 2023, we had a budget of 1.166 million. This year, we're proposing a budget of $1,198,000, which is an increase of 32,000 or 2.7%. Again, revenue would balance out the expenditures, making a net zero. For additions to base budget in the building department, we're looking to create a facilities manager position. This position would oversee regular maintenance of all city facilities, call in regular service contractors, make sure that all facilities were being serviced at the same level of service, and that service was consistent through all of them. And also, because that person would be one person overlooking all the facilities, he'd have a better idea of the asset management and be able to plan capital projects accordingly also. Excuse me. This position would be a cost of $163,000 per year, including benefits and vehicles. Although it's proposed in the building department right now, it's not anticipated that this project would be funded through the levy. So it would probably end up being in a different department, since the building department has to be net zero. But this is where we're presenting it. So engineering 0303, 2023 year in review. We hired a manager of municipal infrastructure. I'm sitting back there. He came back to us from the county. He has a brief stay at the dark side. Development engineer was a replacement, and we hired a new another replacement was a construction inspector. We launched the first ever asset management survey, improved the AMP data confidence and inventory for core and non-core assets, and tendered approximately $12.4 million in construction projects. And that includes the water and sanitary sewers that we do for the county. Objectives for 2024, complete the draft plan of subdivision for the lands east of Highway 401, which would basically better known as the Elliott and Corlett Farms. We've been working on the background studies and preliminary designs for a couple of years now, and we're now ready to make draft plan of application. So council should see that in front of them this year, hopefully for approval and to move it up to the county. We're planning on updating the asset management plan with non-core assets, improve the condition data, confidence for all asset levels. One of our construction projects this year would be the installation of our first pedestrian crossing on a city street, Springbank, north of Sprucedale. That would be very similar to the one the county put on Parkinson by Southside Pond a few years ago. And we'll be hiring a senior survey technician, and that's a replacement since our old senior survey technician became one of our inspectors after one of our inspectors retired, so it's trickle down effect there. Notable changes in the budget for engineering. There's an increase in the overhead recovered by the county for capital projects. This was negotiated through the new water and wastewater agreement with the county. There's a decrease in new equipment. Last year we had a spike in new equipment because we had to buy some fairly expensive survey equipment, but that was purchased last year, so we're kind of back to basics level. There's an increase in the vehicle operating expense. We've inherited the old fire vehicle for technicians to use, so we didn't have to buy a new vehicle, but we're starting to put away. We increased the vehicle operating expense so you can start putting away for when we release, when we have to replace this vehicle. We're kind of glad we got it because we've been talking a lot in the House. The construction inspectors and the survey all have their own vehicles, but our design technicians and GIS personnel do not. So the last few years, they've been having to use their own vehicles more and more. So this way, they'll all share that vehicle, and it's actually being used on a fairly consistent basis. There's a decrease in the locating fees, you know, it's under engineering, and that's because the locating fee costs are now allocated to all the proper subcategories such as water, wastewater, and streetlights. So quick overview of the numbers in engineering for revenues. We had a budgeted revenue in 2023 of $711,000. This year we're budgeting $752,000 for an increase of 5.8%. In terms of expenditures, so engineering will be wages, equipment, office supplies, all that stuff. Budgeted expense in 2023 was 2.435 million. 2024 budgeted expense is 2.371 million, or a decrease of 63,000 or 2.6%. Streetlights and traffic signals going from 752,000 in 23 to 809 in 2024, so an increase of 57,000 or 7.6%. And then the other miscellaneous, such as methane and other miscellaneous things, 2023 budget of 87,000, 2024 of 92, or an increase of 5. Bottom line, we're decreasing the overall net cost of the engineering department by 44,000, or a decrease of 1.7%. Engineering base to budget requests. The first one would be in addition to the, or increase the asphalt resurfacing reserve contribution. Excuse me. The recommended level to keep the existing level of service for asphalt is to spend $2 million a year, with the reserve being $1 million. Finance through reserves decreases the debt load. We have been increasing that reserve. Council approved that a number of years ago. We've been jumping it up 200,000 a couple of times, but we still haven't reached that $1 million goal. So the ask is to increase it another 200,000 to reach that goal. We would like to create a bridges reserve. There's approximately $2.5 million of bridge work coming up in the next few years. That includes the Butler Street Bridge, which is scheduled for 2027, if I believe, of 1.6, and then there's some other work after that. So creating the reserves helps eliminate the peaks and valleys, and instead of paying it in 2027 1.6 million, we're hoping that if we can start putting away $400,000 a year right now, that they won't hurt so much when we actually have to do the work. Create a reserve for road reconstruction. The asset management plan recommends that to properly manage our road assets, the city invests approximately $10.6 million per year in road renewal activities. The creation of a reserve eliminates the peaks and valleys. The city is currently paying $1.1 million in interest to service debt incurred from road reconstruction projects. Establishing a dedicated reserve will allow the city to transition the funding strategy for road reconstruction from debt supported to reserve supported. It frees up money to be spent. It frees up money being spent on debt servicing to be reallocated to bridge the funding gap for roads. We're hoping that council will approve starting that reserve at $400,000 a year. And then another reserve addition to base budget. We used to have a reserve for street lighting that was stopped in 2021. We'd like to start that up again. I think it was the reason it was stopped in 2021 was we had just finished converting all of the city's street lights into LEDs. It was a fairly expensive project done over 4 or 5 years. So we thought, most of the capital work was done. However, what wasn't done as part of that project was all the direct buried wire that is slowly rotting in the ground. And so we're finding that we're actually having to spend a fair amount every year to do spot repairs. So we're starting a program as part of our in conjunction with our street reconstructions, where if we're reconstructing the street that has underground wire, we're also replacing the street wire. So we'd like to start a reserve to start, again, offset the pain. And then also we have a number of areas probably, that don't have streetlights, that we have in the plan to start putting streetlights in. So we're requesting $50,000 a year to fund that account, or start that account back up. Which brings us, so that's it for engineering. We're now into bylaw 0304. The 2023 year in review, we hired an additional bylaw officer. There was 1,225 concerns and complaints addressed by the department, which is down a little bit from 1,500 from the year prior. Most of those complaints were property standards or parking issues. The objectives for 2024, we'd like to update the sign bylaw as well as the property standards bylaw. We'd also like to investigate administrative penalties, which is a method that can streamline appeals and guaranteed payments. Notable changes in the budget. Revenues from last year was showing a $15,000 one-time transfer to pay for new software that we had last year. That's not this year, so you're going to see a dip in the revenues budget. And then there's an increase in the vehicle operations and communications expenses to cover the cost for the additional officer. So if you look at the numbers, revenue, and for the bylaw departments, it's very small revenues. 2023, $16,000. As I mentioned, it went down 15,000 to a revenue of 1,000. So a drop of 94% basically. The expenditures from 2023, they were 526,000. Now we're projecting 534,000, or an increase of $8,000 or 1.5%, which brings the net increase for the department to 4.5%. Or in addition to base budget, staff is asking that there be a new position creation of a bylaw manager position. This position would have direct oversight over the bylaw and parking departments and contract departments that are associated with those two programs. It would also provide additional staff time to update the property standards and sign bylaws, as well as update parking standards and a host of other, little projects that just seem to sit at the corner of a desk and never really get addressed. It's been a long time since we've actually updated one of our city bylaws. This position we're estimating of $125,000 a year, including benefits. For parking, notable changes in the budget. This year has full 2 years of a full-time contract parking enforcement officers. Did I say that right? Yeah, has a full year of 2 full-time parking contract officers. Yeah. Has a decrease in revenue to reflect historic violations and transfer of funds from reserves already completed. So quick overview of the numbers for revenue. Looking at 2023, we budgeted a revenue of 152,000. 2024, we're down to 137,000, or a drop of 15,000 or 10%. In terms of expenditures, administration costs, 2023, we're at 87,000. We're only going up 1,000 or up to 88,000 for 2024. And then operations and then expenses. 2023 was 196. 2024, we're budgeting 203. So that's an increase of 3.6%. Net increase for the department is almost 18%, basically due to that large drop in the revenue. Transit, 0709, 2023, we recorded the highest ridership ever on our conventional transit system, over 552,000 riders. We improved schedule adherence on all routes. I think we're in excess of 90% meeting schedule at all times. And we added some new shelters along with transit map class in the shelters. 2024 objectives, staff's planning on doing an in-house to investigate expansion of service through new routes. We basically would like to create routes that are not as dependent on each other, that become more independent, so they don't all go to the transit terminal, but can keep their loops. And that way, if one route needs to be expanded, that route can be expanded independent of all the other ones. Whereas right now, if we change one route, we have to change the whole system, because they all rely on that one connection at the transit terminal right now. We want to improve driver retention, and we also want to improve bus stop and shelter maintenance. So if we look at the budget, notable changes that you'll see is the revenue from fares is up $135,000 to reflect the increased ridership. There's an increase in full-time wages to reflect the conversion of a part-time custodian to a full-time custodian. There's decrease in shelter maintenance due to doing it in-house. And there's a $110,000 increase in equipment charges to own to reflect increased parts for fuel and insurance, and basically the cost to run a bus. So looking at the numbers, revenue, 2023 fare revenue was budgeted at $540,000. Next year, we're hoping to get $775,000 or an increase of $235,000, excuse me, or 43.5%. Miscellaneous revenue, which would be advertising and things like that. Last year, we budgeted $685,000. 2024, we're hoping to get $720,000 or an increase of 5.1%, bringing the total increase for the revenue up to 22, bringing total percentage up to 22%. For expenditures, operations, 2023, we had 3.409 million. We're keeping it the same for 2024. Administration costs were 739,000 in 23. That's increasing to 847 in 2024, or an increase of 10.7%. Overall, right now, the net increase for the transit department is at a negative 5.6%. So that's due in large part due to that increase in ridership that we've been seeing the last few years, and have now hit a record high, and we're hoping it'll continue to increase. Additions to base budget. So in a way, we have one increase, one request for transit, but it breaks down into a number of different options. And basically that request is to extend the service hours of the transit operation. We believe that increasing service hours can provide a more useful system to our users. Right now, with the way we start and the way we end, it's not always usable for some people who have hours that, they have to start work at the same time the bus system starts for the day. So if they don't end up taking it to work, then there's a good chance they're not going to end up taking it home either. So we're hoping that if we can extend it, so I'm going to go through these options, but yeah, basically we're hoping that if we can extend transit hours, we end up making it more useful for residents, and that in turn then just feeds on itself, and then ridership will go up even more. So the first option is to increase weekday service by 2 hours, and that would be starting an hour earlier every day, Monday through Friday, and ending an hour later every day. This we think will help the shift workers who start at 6, and we're estimating a 5% increase in ridership if we do this. So this increase would then be an increase in the base budget of $271,000 for conventional transit. And because AODA requires that if we extend conventional transit service hours, we have to extend paratransit also. The para budget that would also have to increase by another $35,000, $36,000. Second option is to increase Saturday service. Currently, Saturday service is a few hours shy of what we run in during the week. We're proposing to basically match that. Saturday would match the Monday through Friday times of 5 to 11. We think this will bring an increase in 3% in ridership, and comes with a cost of $215,000 for conventional and another $15,000 for paratransit. The third single option, or singular option, let's say, is to add Sunday and holiday service. We're proposing to add 9 hours on Sundays and stat holidays, except for Christmas Day, from either 9 a.m. or 6 p.m. to 6 p.m. or 8 to 5. Haven't landed on one for sure yet, to provide more consistent service. And recognizing that some businesses are still, a lot of businesses are open on Sundays. And we have had a number of requests in the past for, so help people get to church. We're estimating 200 rides per Sunday or holiday. So the net increase, if you added the Sunday service just by itself, would be $350,000 for conventional and about $41,000 for paratransit. The next two options are basically combinations of the ones we've already talked about. So D basically is an increase of weekday hours and the Saturday service. So basically running Monday through Saturday, 5 till, what did I say? 5 to what? 11. Thank you. So with that option, 6 days, same service. The increase for conventional transit, is $533,000, and then the para would increase another 50,000. And then E is the everything thrown in basket of increasing the weekday, increasing the Saturday service, and adding Sunday and holiday service. The net impact on the budget would be an increase for conventional transit of just over $1 million and about 92,000 for paratransit. So that is that for transit, and then which brings us to paratransit 0710. Revenue, we're showing the same as last year. The ridership hasn't really changed. Expenditures and operations, we're showing an increase of 45,000 or almost 6%. The administration costs are rising from 30 to 31,000 or 2%, which is bringing the expenditures for paratransit up $46,000 or 6.1%. And that's it.
That's it. Make it sound simple. Well, before we get into the details, of course, we just heard a lot of information. Any questions before we get into each individual section? For Mr. Dahan. Councillor Wismer Van Meer.
Through the mayor to Mr. Dahan, I don't think it's as much of a question as a comment. I think in looking at the transit, especially, I know there are manufacturers in our community that is a massive barrier for a lot of their employees. And especially with the holidays, for instance, Remembrance Day, I know that my connection to one of the local manufacturers, they had a large number of individuals that couldn't get into work that day because the transit wasn't running and taxi services and such. So when you're looking at holidays, is that going to, you said, encompass all holidays other than Christmas Day, correct?
Your worship, through the councillor, that is correct, yes.
Councillor Leatherborough.
Your worship to Mr. Dahan, kind of branching off of Councillor Wismer Van Meer's question, I may have missed it, but I'm assuming the holiday service would be a reduction of service still time-wise?
Your worship, through the councillor, yes. It's either going to be like, it's probably going to be like an 8 to 5 day rather than the 18 hours that we're proposing for all the other days.
Councillor Schadenberg.
Yeah, thanks. Again, the question to Mr. Dahan. If AODA compliance requires paratransit to be running when the conventional buses are running, what about the opposite? For example, just throwing this out as an idea, could paratransit run on the Sunday when buses are not running?
Your worship, through the councillor, I think so. Yep.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Accioni. Just a quick question about bylaw officers. Do they bridge hours or are they all working?
Your worship, through the councillor, there is a core time every day where they're all in together, but some start earlier and some work later.
Thank you. Councillor Wismer Van Meer.
Sorry, I thought of something after Councillor Leatherborough mentioned it. You to Mr. Dahan again, with the talking about the holidays. So if it is running like an 8 to 5, for instance, on that day of Remembrance Day, when the majority of folks are working, is that going to have the same schedule? Because I think it's not addressing the issue, unfortunately.
Your worship, through to the councillor, yes, you are correct. That would completely solve the manufacturer's concerns. We could look at, excuse me, we could look at maybe, I'm not sure what holidays you then put a line to. Like, obviously, you don't need to run an 18-hour day on a Sunday, I don't think. But then if you say that you want to just do stat holidays, which stat holidays do you do? Because some people have them off, some people don't, you know. If you'd like, we can take a look at making exceptions for certain holidays.
Yeah, just to follow up, I'm just wondering if that might be something to kind of review in that decision is, you know, what does the holiday schedules kind of look like for most not just manufacturers, but businesses as well. Obviously, we know, for instance, Family Day, there's, you know, a number of businesses that are closed, but others are open, and that happens with Remembrance Day. So just wondering, like you said, how do you really make that decision? Where do you cut that line off, and how is that predetermined? And maybe looking at what happens in other municipalities as a comparison. I've
Mhm.
never really looked at that before, so.
Actually, thank you for bringing that up. I think that's a fair question. Any other general questions? I have one for paratransit.
Okay.
It seems to be, I get questioned a fair bit. And we actually coincidentally spoke earlier on a couple of other items, but paratransit seems to be, a delay, and I'm just, I know 24 hours, they have to call ahead. After we spoke coincidentally today, I had another complaint of not being able to get any bookings. How often would you estimate, and by all means, go and email me tomorrow or
Mhm.
next week is fine, but I'm curious how often we can't fulfill paratransit requests. If this is something common or not.
Your worship, we actually do get that complaint quite often. So we have looked at it in the past. Now, it's been a little bit since I've looked at it recently. But I know when we've looked at it in the past, the unable to provide percentage has been usually less than 5%. It's definitely less than 10% of the ridership requests, which we always kind of thought was a fair goal. As I mentioned, in terms of compliance for timings for the buses, our goal is to be 95% compliant at all time, to the timing schedule. So we kind of use the same criteria for the para. That being said, we are talking with our service provider, because in our opinion, because he's in his contract, he's got a goal of a certain number of rides per bus per hour. And in our opinion, he's not hitting that number. So in our opinion, if he.
Okay. So apologies for those at home watching, little technical difficulties, but I think we caught it apparently pretty quickly. So we're going to continue on where we were. I do have a question for you, if you don't mind.
Mhm.
This is going back to transit and specifically about drivers. First off, how many full-time drivers do we have versus part-time drivers?
We have 6 full-time drivers and 22 part-time drivers.
Okay, and would we be looking at changing that if we do one of A through E, I believe it was, options?
Your worship, built into every one of those options is a conversion of as many part-time positions into full-time as we can fit it in. Obviously, we still need some part-times to cover lunches and stuff like that and certain gaps. But yeah, we want to increase our full-time complement as much as possible because it would also help improve our employee retention. Right now, we have a lot of employee turnover because they start part-time and then they find a full-time job at another transit operation.
Yeah, I really wondered that.
Yeah.
Yeah, excellent. I'm glad to have more full-time for sure. Any other questions? Yes, Councillor Wismer Van Meer.
I actually think Councillor Lauder she had a question before we lost our feed, so I'll let her go first and then I'll do mine.
Mine is
Okay,
just
thank
a
you.
short one, and I did talk to Mr. DeHaan about it, so I'll just let him explain in it. It's the bylaw fines, and I know that the amount is just minimal, actually nothing, but I just wondered why it was that small, if there were no fines, or what happens there. So he was explaining it to me, and so I'll let him go ahead and do it again for the rest.
Your worship, through the council, yes, bylaw fines are usually property standards fines, and most of them we don't actually end up fining because we give an order onto the property owner and to give them 30 days and they fix it or they clean it up, whatever. And if they do that, then there's no fine levied. Although a lot of our calls are out of the property standards issue, we don't end up we like to actually work with the resident or owner to clean up the mess rather than fine them.
Okay, I actually had written a very similar question down too. I was curious of parking Lately, I seem to be hearing a lot more parking tickets. So is that revenue has got to be up, I would assume.
Your worship, in regards to parking, yeah, that shows up in the parking department. It is up, and we had, a couple of hiccups in 2023 with our contract parking guy. We had one guy quit and the contractor had a hard time filling that position. Since the beginning of the year though, they've had 2 full-time guys and they're writing basically, what was the last number I heard? It's usually in the range, it's usually around, I want to say it's in the range of 20 to 40 tickets a day. And we got one guy concentrating in the downtown area and another guy all in the residential areas. So we've really cracked down on that and hoping with the continued constant enforcement that people will learn and start following the rules a little bit better than they have been.
That would certainly explain all the calls.
Okay.
So note that, people watching at home, we are out there ticketing. And yeah, Councillor Wismer Van Meer.
I actually just want to correct, earlier I had mentioned the holiday being Remembrance Day. That's the wrong one. It's actually Easter Monday is the day I was thinking of.
Okay.
So Easter Monday is the day that there's not transit running, but most of the businesses, especially manufacturing, is open and operating. So that is the date. I apologize. I did say Remembrance Day. We do have regular service that day, and thank you to the staff for correcting me on that. But yes, it's Easter Monday is the day that that was mentioned to me.
Yep.
So I apologize for that.
Okay, thank you. That makes a lot of sense.
Thank you. Any other questions in general on the presentation before we get into the pages? Seeing none, let's start. So we are going to start with building department, pages 25 and 26. Any questions of council? Seeing none, we'll move along. Bylaw is on page 34 and 35. Councillor Leatherborough.
Through your worship to Mr. DeHaan, just wanting to be on the right page as well as refer to the presentation with the proposed bylaw manager, specifically about property standards. I think that's great that the approach is to work with the owner. However, I am contacted about some properties that just, they don't seem to come to be as nice looking as one would hope.
Mhm.
So in the event that there is 1 or 2 properties that are consistently maybe falling to the wayside or they've been warned, will this manager help with alleviating those types of fines or working with these properties? I'm just trying to wrap my mind around how this could actually help with property standards or vacant buildings and those types of things that's still happening in the city of Woodstock.
Your worship, through the councillor, an update of the property standards bylaw basically would address all that kind of stuff. It is literally probably been decades since it's been updated, and we would take all of those matters into consideration. Also with the dedicated position of a bylaw manager, he would be able then to spend more time directly with the guys and look at direct situations out in the field. Right now, it's kind of, you have the chief building official looking over it, as well as parking and building department and zoning and his deputy also. So their energies are kind of stretched, but with a dedicated manager, yes, he'd be able to help the guys and work on specific situations.
So just if I can continue, Mayor, thank you. So just with the outdated property standards, so will that mean obviously like any other bylaw, it'll be updated and easy to ticket, or it'll just be kind of referencing to still work with property owners that aren't looking after their property? Again, on a basis of it's a common theme, not right out of the gate where.
Your worship, through to the councillor. I'm not sure if in order to make it easier to ticket, you have to add short form wording. There you go. Thank you. To be honest with you, I haven't thought about that addition of it, but that's probably something we should consider, because that does make it easier to ticket rather than giving an order and then having to go to court, right, in order to levy a fine.
Thank you very much. I fully support updating that property bylaw standards.
As do I, and correct me if I'm wrong here in stating this, I believe those bylaws will come back to this council and we'll be able to discuss them and vote on them and, suggest any changes.
Oh, your worship, definitely.
Right?
Yes,
Yes.
and honestly, yeah, that and the sign bylaw they've been to-do items for a number of years, sitting on somebody's desk that honestly, we just don't have a chance, haven't had the time to get to. So staff wants to get to updating those as much as council would like to see us do that.
I certainly understand that as a growing city and everything we're going through right now, so I appreciate that. Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Accioni. On page 34, line item 71216-0318, conferences and seminars, budgeting for $3,000, but last year was just about $500. Was that a one-off, not able to optimize all of the conferences and training? Or is that a recurring issue that just aren't enough staff to allow people to get away to take professional development?
Your worship, it's kind of a combination of both, to be honest with you. Yeah, having guys on vacation and not, and having to fill it, as well as, to be honest, and not to sound like a broken record, it's also not having the time to look up the conferences and say, hey, we need to send you to this, or, that kind of thing. I know that we have in the past, spent a lot more than we did last year.
Thank you. Any other questions of council? I do have one question on page 34, the very bottom item ending in 0805, labor charges, other. What exactly would that be?
Your worship, that is the security and the contract parking enforcement.
So that simply costs a lot more than expected there,
Yep.
but we're expecting not to have that expense this year?
Correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Last chance for bylaw. Then we'll move along to parking, pages 44 and 45. Any questions of council? Well, while you're looking at your books, I do have one question on page 44. Traffic violations, 693030000, 9,000 revenue to 1365. What is that? And then going along to 4,000.
Your worship, I'm not exactly sure why exactly it dropped so much this year, but the 5-year average for that account was just over $6,100. So it's kind of an anomaly last year.
So is that dictated by parking tickets? Is that?
No, that's
Would that
parking
be?
violations. That's two lines above.
Oh, yes. So the traffic violations, would that be from police making those charges? then?
Yes. Yes.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Counselor Martin.
Just to clarify, that's our portion of the what goes to POA?
I think so, yes.
Okay.
No.
No?
Your worship, through to the councillor's question, it is the parking tickets that are written by the police. The ones that we do collect before they go. We don't necessarily send them all to, they don't all have to go through court, and then we get a portion of it back.
So I believe there's two ways to write a parking ticket.
One by the police and one by the bylaw officers, yes.
Yeah, one's through the Highway Traffic Act provincially, one's through our bylaw. So those written under our bylaw, we get the money. Those written under the HTA, Highway Traffic Act, provincially, I guess, stays with the province or the county, actually. That would be County of Oxford would get that money. Right, so any police officers watching this, please write them under city bylaw, please. Any other questions? Page 44 and 45 for parking. Councillor Leatherborough?
Through your worship, so I'm just confused. I guess I'll volley this to you. So were we talking about parking violations and then a couple down traffic violations, and those are both issued by police?
Your worship, through the council, no, parking violations are written by our bylaw officers. Traffic violations are written by the Woodstock Police.
Again, my question was just why the big difference between the years, that's all. But we can probably bring that back, Councillor Lauder and I, to our police board and ask those questions of the police.
Yep.
Okay, thank you. Last chance, any questions in parking? Pages 44 and 45.
Your worship, I may regret this, but we kind of skipped over the engineering department.
We did so, right at the very beginning, pages 31 and 33. Thank you for that.
My pleasure.
That was not done on purpose, I'm sorry. So those watching at home, assuming we're done with parking, everybody okay with that? I'm gonna say yes. All right, let's go back to page 31. And I'm gonna include 31, 32, and 33. If there's any questions in particular, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Accioni. Page 32, 303-74097-0412, Crow relocation. Since our Crow report and then some subsequent interaction with the public, a lot of questions about this budget line. To the average person, $17,000 for birds seems like a lot of money. We heard in the report in November, I think it was, might have been December, the impact to a local business, it was significant financial impact. Can you just elaborate, not just for us, but for the public, on the history or kind of how $17,000 relates to the actions that crow removal has on city business? Mitigation, that's a good word, thank you.
Your worship, through the councillor, yeah, the Crow relocation project, program, sorry, was started, 20 years ago, maybe, something like that. And basically, the crows are an intelligent species. So if you disturb them when they're starting to roost, they will soon learn not to try to roost there. So what the program basically all does is tries to herd the crows out of residential or industrial, basically out of the habited areas of the city into the nature areas of the city. It used to be basically the Pittock reservation lands, used to include also the Brick Pond area, but over the last few years, we've got the crow population has grown so much that the Brick Ponds cannot handle the crows anymore. So basically they're all worked towards the Pittock area. Normally what happens is the company comes out starting in the fall when they start to roost or start to come into town, and we'll push them over that way. Normally he comes 3-4 times a week at dusk and scares them off. And then once they learn that pattern, that's usually enough that the rest of the winter he'll just come like once a week just to kind of reinforce it. With the warmer weather this year and with the amount of crows that we're now dealing with record high number of crows. And because the ice hasn't thrown on Pittock, which basically has taken a landing area away from the crows, the treed area in Pittock has not become enough area for the crows to roost. So they're now, slowly encroaching south into the populated areas. I was talking to the company, Martin, earlier this week again, and he's back up to 3 times a week trying to push those crows farther north. And again, he says it was good when the ice was frozen, but now with the warmer temperatures again, they've started pushing back south again. Does that help?
It does help. I guess, from a $17,000 perspective and crow relocation, we're really not moving them anywhere outside the city limits by any means. We're kind of just trying to manage their behavior within the city limits. And this may never, ever, ever go away.
Your worship, through the councillor, that's correct. We are getting crows from all the way from Tobermory and farther north, He said they all just come south. So it's not like you can, yeah, yeah.
This came up at Roma, speaking with some of our northern neighbors and friends from other municipalities. And this is kind of the first time they've been seeing this during the winter time, because even there, they're not getting the winter and they're just not accustomed to crows at all during the winter. And it's
Because they come to
quite-
us.
Yes, they're mostly here, but yeah, so this is definitely Ontario wide. Again, it
Yeah,
was the
yeah.
biggest,
Chatham-Kent has a big problem also.
yeah, it's something discussed all over. So this is not just a Woodstock problem, unfortunately. This is something we're seeing right across the board. Anything else? Again, pages 31 to 33 for engineering department, with my apologies again. Then I will ask another question I have on my page, page 32. Electricity, so that's 0351 in the bottom section. I see electricity was much higher than budgeted, but yet we're going back. Do we expect electricity prices to go down, or are we just turning off lights more?
Your worship, we still have to talk with Hydro One. We think that they have too high of a count for our number of streetlights than what we actually have. The reason we didn't bump it up is the 5-year average is still under 600,000. So we're hoping that next year we won't go up.
Well, yeah, considering now my understanding is we've converted everything to LED, and that number should definitely be lower, not
Correct.
historic of what it's been, even
Yeah.
though we are recognizing
Yeah.
we've added a lot of streetlights.
Now that 5-year program
Right.
includes the LED lights, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so. Any other questions of council? All right, seeing none, that'll finish off engineering department. And we'll jump back down to, where were we? Transit. 46 to 48. Then we'll do paratransit separately. So transit 46 to 48. Any questions of council? Councillor Schanberg.
Yeah, from the mayor through to Harold DeHaan. I guess the best question would be is, I know we've gone through the capital budget already. But what happens if we accept, say, option 4? Do we have enough buses to be able to, under regular maintenance standards, be able to carry on that many hours, more hours on the road?
Your worship, through the councillor, yes, the route, currently the routes are staying the same, and the number of buses on the on the road will be the same as currently. They'll just be running longer. But you are correct, running longer means more breakdowns and that kind of thing. But we do, I don't know if you remember, about 2 years ago, we got funding from the government to buy 2 brand new buses, which they weren't replacements, they were additions to the fleet. So we think we're comfortably covered that way.
Great question. Any other questions on transit? Again, 46 all the way to 48. Councillor Schanberg.
Under revenue near the top of page 46, it noted that the budget for 2023 was 450,000 for gas tax, and it was only 134 was the amount collected. Is there any reason why it went so far down, and why you expect to be back up to 450,000 in 2024?
Your worship, through to Councillor Schattenberg. We're still awaiting the announcement on the gas tax, and because of the differential in the fiscal years, when we get the number, it will be recorded as an account receivable for us back into 2023. Should be any day.
Can we ask the provincial government to use the same calendar we use?
That's all you want to ask them? I got a list. That's far bigger than this book. All kidding aside. I do have a question as well on page 46. Sorry, no, I went back to that one. Page 48, under fee assistance subsidy. So that is 0314. What exactly is that?
Your worship, that's
That's fair.
the inclusion of transit into the FAIR program that council approved last year.
That's what I was guessing. Just want to make sure. Thank you. Last chance. Any questions on transit? Okay, we'll move along to paratransit, which is on page 49. Any questions of paratransit? I've already asked mine, so. Councillor Leatherborough.
Through your worship, to Mr. DeHaan, who's almost done here. On page 49, under the paratransit admin advertising. So 2023 budgeted for 2,000 and then year to date was 541. Just curious, going back to the schedule 2024, 2,000, can you share anything about what advertising would be for paratransit?
Your worship, through to the counselor, I would have to look it up what that specific charge was, and I can easily email you tomorrow to tell you. If I had to hazard a guess, though, I'd probably say it's an ad in what's in Woodstock.
Sorry, and just if I can clarify, thank you for that. I was just wondering what more advertising could be done, I guess. Would just be more ads then, essentially, just advertising the service?
Your worship, through counselor, that is correct, yes.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of paratransit? Seeing none, I think you're off the hook. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And next up, we have Dan Locke, Director of Public Works. And this will be the assortment of pages between 16 and 43. Welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of council, it's my pleasure to present the Public Works budget for 2024. I'll try and be brief, yet hopefully somewhat informative. I do want to touch on a few things. We'll show some highlights from 2023, some 2024 initiatives, and we'll give a quick overview of the budget numbers. I do have 2 requested additions to base in on the tax levy side, and 2 on the water ratepayer side. Also worth noting is that there were 4 temporary positions and 1 supervisor position that you gave pre-budget approval back in September. We actually have that role for the supervisor filled. Rob Van Vliet is here. So if you guys haven't had a chance to meet Rob, Rob's over here. I will say we have had a challenge filling temp roles, and we're continuing to try and do that. And with the uncertainty and it's becoming clearer as we go, but the uncertainty with the recycling, we went with temps at this point in time. There's always the balance between temps and full-time before you get to the how much you're sinking into a full-time person and you can keep and retain versus somewhat revolving door with temps. So moving on. We have 4 key service areas in Public Works. We have the Public Works or the roads kind of area, waste and sanitary sewers, and water that we'll touch on today. It's worth noting that 3 of these 4 areas are county funded areas of the budget. So each of my slides in the different areas will go through kind of this format where there's a little bit of a year in review, proposed initiatives for 2024, and then I've included the budgeted maintenance programs off to the side for your reference, if you will. So in this area, we have the Public Works Garage, looking at the year in review, that started this in 2023, servicing the police vehicles, which is a great story, and that we brought that back in-house, and I think it's been very successful. We continue to build out our work management system across all of, you'll see this throughout the slides, but across all of Public Works, and we're about 50% in this area and building that out, so some good strides there. So in the 2024 initiatives, we're continuing to do the building out of our SOPs, our standard operating procedures. So the how we do what we do out there and make sure that it's safe and everybody's informed. So we're building out those procedural documents. Again, the work management system. And the two additions to base that are in here, one is, we'll get into more depth on those, but there's the two that we're talking about. So the numbers, and keep in mind those pre-approved numbers are in here, and then including the increases in the labor dollars or projected increases. So I won't go through this too much. I will say that if you look at the revenue line on the first line, we did increase that 41,000 to offset increases that we're seeing, inflationary increases in equipment. And that's something, so we're charging ourselves more for the equipment that we're doing so that we have more in the reserve to replace those vehicles when the time comes to do so. Looking at the bottom line number, if you look at that, it's about a 9% increase. And the additions to base, the one preventative maintenance technician in the fleet services area, that one, I'm just going to follow along with my other notes here. So that one would be around 41,500 for this year's budget, and the skilled labor would be around $43,710. The preventative maintenance technician, basically this one is one that frees up the mechanics to continue to do licensed mechanic work. So this would be a tech in the garage area that would be able to do oil changes, minor repairs, shuttling vehicles, things of that nature that don't require a licensed mechanic to do that. So it has that benefit. I think over time we'll figure out the ROI on that and likely be able to report back to council at some point in time with that. The skilled labor position is it's kind of our general labor pool in Public Works. It's is a position that works in the road maintenance, storm maintenance, those areas. And since I've been here, I've seen them far too often where we've had to pivot and not do a job because we don't have the personnel. This is the pool of people that go on to the more scheduled type of work, garbage, recycling, collection, the ones that have a scheduled burden to them. The Enviro Depot, if they need somebody to fill in up there. So often we're pulling out of that labor force, and it's just to the point where we need to have more bodies there to do the work that we're budgeted to do. So we'll go through the waste budget here. So year in review, there's no garbage. This is something that we're quite proud of. No garbage or recycling collection that have been canceled in Woodstock ever. And I'd have to ask Warren, but I believe it goes back more than 20 years. So it's something that they're quite proud of, that metric, and it's kind of anecdotal, but it's something that we're quite proud of doing that. And the Enviro Depot, next line. We've increased again this year in the number of vehicles served. So we've went up a little bit there, 49,000 up from 48. So just a few hundred there, basically. And the Enviro Depot, quite proud of this, but our Enviro Depot won an award from Call to Recycle selected us to receive the Leader in Sustainability Award for 2023 in recognition of exceptional commitment to the environment and outstanding battery collection results. So it's something that's quite proud. We'll be able to. They have a crest or a stamp that we can now add to our site. We'll be adding those to all of our signs, and so it's quite quite an achievement for that area. 2024 initiatives, we're looking at the organics. We're partnering, well, we're working with the county to look at how we would service this here and whether we can do it in a similar fashion to the recycling or in the garbage. So we're also in the process of figuring out where we fall out in the recycling, the changes to the extended producer responsibility model that the province put out. So just in the last little while, the RFP to bid on this collection, Oxford collection area, catchment area, has come out. So we're working through what that looks like. And so more of the pieces of that puzzle are becoming clearer. I expect that later, maybe a month or two from now, I'll be bringing a report to council to inform council of what that looks like more as we learn through that. So again, the build out on the work management and SOPs continue in this area. So then we'll get into waste numbers. Really not much of a change here. I think it's just the increase in labor dollars, projected increase there. And so sanitary sewers. This area is an area where we negotiated a new contract. And so we have a 5-year agreement that we've worked on and got in place this year with the county for the water and wastewater. And I think that'll serve us well going forward. We have the operational technologist coordinator has started developing standard operating procedures in this area. She's also working with their counterpart at the county to make sure that we're aligning these as well, so that it's you know, we're creating a consistent standard across the board. The mesh business analyst has been developing a lot of modules for this area, the hydrant maintenance, the valve turning, all those types of maintenance activities that you see. Oh, this is in the sanitary, sorry. So on the manhole cleaning, all of the flushing of our sewer lines. So they're building those ones out here. Oops. And so we're continuing the initiative to build out our operational procedures, SOPs, and the county has asked us to move to a different work management system, Cartograph. It has it's not much different than Mesh, other than Mesh is more point-based and Cartograph is a linear-based system. They do sort of the same things past that difference. And so we're working with them on that. This area, through the negotiations, you're probably wondering, a 62.6% increase. So we basically, when we went through the negotiations, we created a new budget, basically. We had certain things that weren't in this budget before. So in the general admin, we didn't have training. We didn't have, you know, a lot of the staff burdens for stat time, vacation, and all of that. So it's all built in. It parallels the water budget much closer now. We looked at the overheads as we went through the negotiations and justified all of these, and the county has agreed to fund those. You'll also note around a $270,000 increase in inspections. That was a county request as well, and that's the transfer of the CCTV program from the engineering's capital works projects, capital works as a project, into our maintenance budget, and that's to align again with the county. One of the things that we did through the county budgeting process was try to align our budgets with them much closer, with the attempt to be identical, but we're very close, and we'll probably refine that as the years go. Water, we were successful again this year with our DWQMS audit. Again, there's a 5-year agreement in this area as well. The mesh, we had some great strides with the mesh work management modules in this area. Next year, we'll pivot to the cartograph ones in 2024. This area, we through that negotiations and budgeting process, we demonstrated the need for 2 additional operators, and I'll show you. I'm going to flip a slide and then come back. So the 2 additional operators, if you can look at this chart, shows staffing levels over the years. And if you look at the disproportionate amount of increase in infrastructure, length of water main, total number of fire hydrants, valves, to the staffing levels not changing over that time. So it's directly relational to growth. And so that's something that the county and us worked out that 2 bodies would work for maintaining at this point. So I'm going to pop back. Sorry. And the numbers here, again, it's county budget. So we did tweak a few things with this through the negotiation and budget process. But pretty much it's stayed the same. The 2 additions are already in this numbers. And so just an overall summary of this work. We're continuing our work management build out. Same with the SOPs, we're doing that. And one of the things, I have it in here because I had it in here last year, establishing work plans for all the public works. That got delayed. I'm going to say the negotiations probably pulled me off of it, and staff time just wasn't there to really build that out. So that will be another one that'll stay in. So the 2024 initiative is continuing the work on the build out of work management, also with cartograph and SOPs, as I've mentioned. And then we have, again, the additions to base, as you can see here, and that's pretty much it. I tried to keep it short. And I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Before we get into questions, I just want to thank you and staff, of course, working together, making that agreement with the county. I know that was really, really important to keep our skilled staff in-house, keep them here. And again, want to thank you for that. Councillor Schattenberg.
Yeah, from the mayor, through to Dan Locke. I guess the first thing is just a clarification. Any change in the recycling process would be January 1st of 2026 then?
Correct. So we transition on December 31st, 2025. The new program starts January 1st, 2026. And so with that, there really is no transition. We just basically hop into the new producer responsibility model.
So the city of Woodstock would be unable to apply for to continue the recycling inside the city of Woodstock only because they want to do it countywide instead of citywide?
Through your worship to the councilor's question, I'll say that's the part that we're learning through the RFP process that I mentioned, that I believe I'll bring a report back to inform council as we're just, I won't get into those details tonight, but it's just, it's a lot to get into. So I'll leave that for a report for a future date, if that's okay.
Just one final question, then. Recycling was never a profit center for the city of Woodstock, even though you could sell fiber, sell tin cans and stuff like that to a recycling company. It was never a profit center whatsoever.
Through your worship to the councilor's question, the revenues generated through that would be offset by expenses, and that would all be transferred to the county. So it would all be a county budget. So, yeah.
If I can touch on that, then I'm curious, are we preparing to be part of putting an RFP forward then, and possibly looking at keeping recycling here or even for the entire county? Can I ask that?
So I would say that we're exploring all options, and I'll bring those back to council for their consideration.
I guess you mentioned that already, so my apologies. I like the idea of having city staff doing city work. That's all. I like that and I'll
Yes.
always promote that. Any other questions in general before we go through, each page? I'm gonna ask one other just general question that you haven't answered yet.
Okay.
Does the city and your departments at all use co-op students? I know a lot of local shops do, so I was just curious.
Through to you, your worship. I'm not sure whether in the past we have, since I've been here, we have not. We are exploring one currently, have just reached out currently. And, so we're looking to see whether there's some benefit there. And I mean, I've used them in the past in other places. I can say I would support something as long as it makes sense and it has benefit on both sides. So for the co-op student, they need to be able to it needs to be a learning exercise, so to speak. And for us, it needs to be something that doesn't constitute taking people away from the roles that they are doing, but has benefit to the corporation too.
I'll just add for that. I'm quite familiar with co-op students and, for the roles I think you're talking about in the shop, just doing general, I can't even say maintenance, but cleanup and maybe oil changes, things like that. Great opportunity. I'm in high schools a lot and I'd always recommend them get in the city, get looking, get learning, get them thinking they want to work for the city of Woodstock. So for what it's worth.
Agreed.
Good. Any other questions in general? Seeing none, I'm glad you brought up the recycling award. I made a note here on my page, so congratulations to staff as well for the Call to Recycle award. Yep, I saw him come in. Then we're gonna jump into Public Works. So we're looking at let's do 16 and 17. For those following at home, we're gonna be looking at 16 to 24 first. But for council, pages 16 and 17. Any questions on those? Councillor Lauder?
Thank you. On the pavement repairs, the budget was last year 508,000 and 341 was just spent. Is that due to you didn't have enough staff to get all that done?
Through you, your worship, to the councilor's question, that's certainly one of the project areas that we tend to shut down and pull people off of. So I would suspect that is, and it's certainly one that I don't want to take dollars away from because there is an abundance of need there. We were also looking at, and we had a change in the supervisor in that area, a new supervisor in. I would say we were looking at a hot box system. The supervisor that came in has some expertise in that area. And so we waited and we're exploring that. So it's one of the carryovers that you might see. And we are executing a new hot box, should be here for this year's work. So.
That's great. I just was thinking that you just didn't have the time to get to it. I wasn't going to take any money away.
Thank you.
We all know the need is there. Any other questions on pages 16 and 17 before we move along? Seeing none, we'll move along. 18 and 19. Councillor Schanberg.
Curious, maybe the same question that Councillor Lauder had about the, in this case, new street signs, to be able to think that the number was lower. I know they magically disappear sometimes in the middle of the night as well and have to be replaced, but new street signs, numbers were much lower in 2023, but back up to 28,000 for this year. Yeah, bottom of page 18.
Through you, your worship, to the councilor's question. Yeah, it's one of those ones that is also one that we need to get out on more. It's also somewhat, I believe this is also the new signs in new subdivisions that come in. And I'm looking over, is that This is new signs and new subdivisions, so somewhat at the mercy of what comes at us as well. So it is driven by that and driven by replacements.
If I can add on that as well, a couple of times, some new residents coming in when I'm meeting with investors or developers coming to the city, comments been made a couple of times about how we don't have great signage on some of our streets. So this is something I'd like to see us look at, and especially looking at how much budget room there is. If we can look at making at least the main roads, street signage would be appreciated. I know, especially from those out of town.
To you, your worship, for clarification, you're talking the street names on the tops primarily?
Yes, on intersections. Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Wismer Van Meer.
This is on page 19. It's 74095-0377. It's the flag maintenance. I know it's noted that this is to replace the flag that's out by the 401. I'm going to get into the business of making flags, I think, too, because that's a good, that's a good dollar that we pay for those. But how often are we having to replace those? Because I see last year we budgeted 4,600. We only spent just under 290. And this year we've gone up to 9,000, as you explain in the book, that's to replace those flags. How often are we having to do this, or is it just kind of when the need's there to replace it, it gets replaced?
Through your worship, to the councillor's question. Yes, certainly we have been replacing them. We've actually repaired some, but replaced them when the need happens. If it gets, we try to take them down and manage it a little bit by forecasting and take it down in high winds so that it doesn't, they tend to rip. So we want to make sure that we try to maintain them well so that they're not out there in those winds. That number that's there, I believe, is projected for 2 new flags, and that's so that we can have them on hand if we need to send one out. And I think we're down to 1 and 1. The quality of them is changed as well. They're more of a silk screen rather than a double stitched type of flag. So we're looking to see where we can get that, and yeah, they are expensive. There's no doubt about that.
If I can add on to that one, I remember in council meetings years ago, us talking about, and I was shocked at the size. Do you know the one by the 401 offhand? I can't remember. It was huge.
30 by 50? 20 by 40. That's
20
close.
by 40. Yeah, it's massive. Like it's 20 feet by 40 feet. It is huge. So if you've got a sewing machine that good, I imagine it's quite limited. So I remember that. Any other questions on pages 18 and 19? Seeing none, we'll move along to pages 20 and 21. Any questions of council? Seeing none, we'll go to 22 and 23, and we'll include 24 to finish off Public Works. So 22, 23, and 24. Any questions of council? Seeing none, we'll move along to now waste. And we're talking pages 27 to 30. So on page 27, any questions of council? Under waste, Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Mayor Achoni. Following up on Councillor Schadenberg's question a little bit earlier about recycling, under revenue, sale of recycled material budgeted at $500,000, but came in last year at 323,000. But we're back up to budgeting for 500,000. Was last year a unique year, or it's just because that is a pretty sizable difference in there, $175,000.
Through you, your worship, to the councilor's question. So the markets fluctuate, and there's not a great way to project that. They dropped significantly in the last year, and part of that is my understanding, talking to our service provider, that China is not accepting what they once were accepting in materials. So we're looking for other global buyers. There they are. And so that market changes and is subject to a lot of fluctuation that way. Our hope is that they find those buyers and things go back up. So going on a 5-year average, we left it where it was.
A follow-up, if you had to look into your crystal ball, once the extended producer responsibility shifts, do you anticipate that the price, the value of recycled material will go up or down?
Through you, your worship, to the councilor's question, the markets fluctuate. I don't know that I see what would happen as a result of the extended producer responsibilities. I do think that with it, the eligible sources, that we're going to have more going to landfill. So I'm not sure whether that'll change the tonnages that are going to the recycled markets or what that impact will be. I think it'll be an interesting thing to do a case study on a few years down the road. But I really don't have a good answer for your question. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Is it something that, so some municipalities have already switched over to the new system. Is it something that people will be taking a look at and evaluating before we move into that transition in January 2026?
So through your worship, to the councilor's question, the municipalities that have moved into it now are in a transitioning period. So they're doing the same things that they were before. They're collecting from the same places that they were before, even those ineligible sources. When the new date comes, so transitions are done and we're into the new program, that stops. And that's when you'll really see that impact. Right now, I don't think we're not learning as much as we would have liked to from the transitioning. So when that happens in the new, after January 1st, 2026, after a certain amount of time, we'll see what that looks like.
Adding on to that, at Roma, I got speaking with a couple of mayors there, and they're forecasting their waste going up because people won't be recycling as much. Is that how you feel as well?
To your question,
Yeah.
it's the likely outcome of this is that human nature says if I have to do more to be environmentally responsible versus putting it in a garbage bag, I think you know what the answer to that is going to likely be. So your small businesses that we were collecting from, the industrial, some of those institutional ones that, again, that's their prerogative at that point, I guess.
Yeah, so to add on Councillor Martin's concerns, I mean, those, how that fluctuates, who knows? I mean, but I do know those that are experiencing are fearful that they're literally looking at maybe needing more garbage trucks because of the demand for garbage is gonna skyrocket versus recycling. And personally, don't see many benefits to this new system coming forward.
Can I add?
Yes,
that,
please.
Worship. With organics, hopefully that pulls out a fair amount out of the garbage stream, and maybe it's a balanced offset. But again, we'd like to pull more out and divert from landfill as much as we can, those things that we can. So
To that, I mentioned that to a couple of the other mayors, but of course they have some of that already in place, so they don't predict the difference. We will, of course. Councillor Lauder.
Thank you, through the mayor too. Dan, on the 0302-69524 city user fees and depot, and I know the note is here. So, so then is that if we pick up the collection of big items, and then you take them to the dump at Dublin.
Yep.
Then can you just explain that and why we put?
I can try.
Fair.
Through your worship to the councilor's question. So the user fee revenue here is an offsetting number that you'll see in the expense line. And that's offset for the tipping fees that we experience at Salford when we take our materials there. So it's kind of self-funding itself, so it should be an equal and offsetting number. So it really just balances inside of the expense lines that you'll see later on. Good.
Anything else on page 27? Another thing maybe I'll mention is I found it interesting to learn that when we go around and pick people's garbage, their waste in the year, we have to go pay a tipping fee, but yet if they bring it, the county doesn't charge us? Is that a fair, or is it, I've got that backwards? Backwards, sorry. I just found that interesting. Anyways, we'll move along. It's been a long night. Pages, well, if nothing else on page 27, sorry. We're okay? All right, pages 28 and 29. Any questions of council? Councillor Wismer Van Meer.
Through you, Mayor, to Mr. Locke, and it's kind of maybe a bit of a question and a comment. It's on page 28, the recycling collection advertising. It ends in 0315. So I see we budget 18,400, we use just about 6,900. What is the advertising we do in that regard when it comes to recycling collection?
Through your worship to the councilor's question, most of our advertising has been through the What's on Woodstock magazine. There may be other advertising that we do internally. I think that this would be primarily that.
So quick, just a bit of a follow-up. I know that this might change with the potential what's coming to us, but I think the one question I get or see from a lot of people is they just have no idea what they can recycle, what they can't recycle. And this household thinks that you can put this in there. And then this household's like, no, you can't put that in there. And I'm just wondering if there's space to, I don't know how to get creative to try to get that out there a bit better, like whether it's videos on the website showing people what, because it's like plastic 3, 4, and 5. But not plastic 3 if it's this. And it gets pretty convoluted, I think, for a lot of people understanding, and that's not necessarily falling on city staff by any means. I don't mean that, but if there's just an easy breakdown away, if that advertising dollar can go towards helping educate people a bit better on what is allowed in recycling and what's not allowed.
Through your worship, the councilor's question and comment. I think that when you're advertising, it's kind of a quick hit. It's not an educational thing, but directing them to our website or to the waste app that's out there, the waste, can't think of the waistline.
Waistline.
Yeah, thank you. Then being able to use that and understand what is acceptable, what's not, how to do that is probably the way to go. It's what we've been trying to encourage and educate. So absolutely.
Yes, I use the app as well, and I've directed it to people, but I still think that there's confusion as to what is allowed and what's not even through that. So I'm just wondering what the ways are of, I mean, it's just kind of general comment questions, throwing it out there.
Fair enough. Any other questions on pages 28 and 29? I do have one on page 29. We're talking about the Enviro Depot. And this is more of a comment than a line question. I have a lot of business owners who are frustrated that are taking personal waste after hours and things like that, but because they're in a company vehicle, they're not allowed. Can we look at ways to maybe, use a judgment on if something is work-related and they're tearing a bathroom apart as a contractor versus getting rid of a mattress on a Saturday afternoon when obviously it's got nothing to do with their business? Have we looked at anything that way?
To your question, your worship, we've talked with staff on this, And it's very difficult when you're on the spot and you've got a lineup of cars and somebody comes in with a commercial vehicle and you can see what's in there. And I would say that they're very good at knowing that that is, whether it's coming from a personal thing or whether it's coming from a business, how many times they've seen that vehicle. We record that. I think staff do the best job they can with the directions that's been given to them. If council wishes to look at allowing that kind of stream, it's really difficult, and I think staff do a great job at that point of contact and under that gun, if you will, when there's a lot of people waiting in the queue and they're having to deny somebody basically for that. So I would say that it would be something that we would either we allow it or we continue on the way we are. If there's a change, I think it would have to be something that council would be likely able to make.
So with that, do I understand you correctly that they do have judgment opportunities there to see it's a toilet if, I don't know, if they're a window company or something like that? Is that a?
To your yeah, to your question or comment, your worship, the direction is that if it's a crested commercial vehicle, that we don't allow those. We don't allow cube vans. We don't allow, those bigger ones. It's that the depot was set up, and my understanding, it's prior to my time, but my understanding it was set up to support residential needs, not commercial or subsidize any businesses. So it's set up for that purpose. And, we take in recycling from all, but when you're talking about the materials that come in, that's what the direction's been.
I'd just like to try to not get things in the garbage if we don't have to, and there's a possibility, but we can speak after on different things like that as well. Yeah.
For sure.
Pages 28 and 29 before we move along. And 30, I guess, sorry, I apologize. I forgot 30 was very short. So including 30 on that to finish off waste. Any questions of waste before we move along to sewer? Seeing none, we'll move along. Page 36 and 37. And I'm going to include 38 as well. So the entire section of, sewer, page 36, 37, and 38. Any questions of council? I guess that means there's no questions. And then water, moving along. We'll go to water department on page 39 before we flip the page, just on 39 in general. Any questions for water? And those watching at home, we're talking about pages 39 to 43. Page 39, any questions of council? I do have one. I realize this is county and everything else, but can you explain the water rates increase? So 695600000 water rates under revenue. There's quite a sizable difference there. Do you mind explaining that?
Sure. So to your worship, the water rates offset the expenses. So the ads of those two bodies to water operators would be in the expenses lines throughout, as well as some of the things that we renegotiated through that process and the budget process. So that the number in there is just offsets so that we're compensated fully. So basically.
Again, I knew that. I wanted to make sure everybody realized if they're following along that by all means. Then we'll move along if nobody has a question to 40 and 41. Questions of council on pages 40 or 41? Seeing none, moving along to finish it off at 42 and 43. I have a question on backflows. Sorry, and I saw you
Yeah.
trying to close it there. You're not off the
Okay.
hook yet. I'm trying to get my head around this because now, of course, we are being charged for backflows. This is part of the county's new program, let's call it. I've asked this question offline as well, but is there a way that City of Woodstock employees who are qualified, we've been doing this for a very long time, is there a way to become qualified under the new system so that we can save the expense of paying a third party, another company to come in and do our own? Can you explain that, please?
Sure. To your question, your worship, the county's bylaw that's passed on backflow prevention has a chart in the back that shows who can do this work. And the City of Woodstock operators are not one of those that have been identified as able to do it and passed by county council. So at this point in time, no. We could look into how that could happen. Keep in mind that the staff in that area are fully funded inside of the budget as it sits. So it would be work outside of the budget, and we would have to figure out how we would fund that.
So again, with the idea, I love city staff doing city work. Would it be worthwhile when we go and sit at county council then to look at the possibilities of adding, it's not just the City of Woodstock, but we are definitely one of them, to have our own water staff be able to do that? Is there value there, or are you comfortable with allowing third parties to come in and that just makes more sense?
To answer your question, your worship, I think that we've done a great job with the backflows and have them in a great condition in Woodstock. So continuing to do some of that work and the familiarity that our staff have with them, you could make an argument that would be work. And I did at the time argue that our operators should be able to work on ours at bare minimum. And as I also argued that they could be able to work on all of the ones across the city. That was not, that did not make it into the report that came forward to council for consideration.
I guess I don't want to take business away, but by local plumbers, because I certainly know they are being added to the list on a fairly regular basis. They're accepting new plumbers, getting the qualifications and now going under that accepted list. And I'd be really curious to see what the City of Woodstock and our own staff could do to get on the list, be qualified again to work on our stuff moving forward. So again, that's a offline statement more than a question, I guess. Moving along, any other questions to finish off? Water, pages 42 and 43. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I guess now we are under mayor and council. So this is our budgets, everybody. So those watching at home, we're going to start with page 105 to 107. So any questions on page 105? Moving along then, no questions on page 105. Flip the page to 106 and 107. Any questions there? Of course, 106 and 107 for those watching are individual budget lines. Councillor Martin?
Thank you. Just noticing on page 106, 711200383 Integrity Commissioner. It's a $2,000 increase. Is that a reflection on the change in Integrity Commissioner or just rates or the amount of anticipated work given things happening?
I'm gonna ask the clerk to answer that if that's okay.
Your worship, through to Councillor Martin, that is actually an increase in response to what we saw in 2023 and anticipated similar increase for 2024. So no change in rates at this time.
Thank you for that. Any other questions on individual budgets? Page 106 and 107. Councillor Schanberg?
Just a question out of curiosity, 8,000 was the budget for sister cities, Sylvania, Ohio. I'm assuming it might be the other two sister cities mixed in there as well. But the budget for 2024 is 5,000 higher at 13,000. What's the difference in the projected costs?
I'll certainly speak to that. Sister city committees, due to COVID, things were brought down a fair bit. There was discussions about trying to get it back to pre-COVID levels, and anticipated the expenses of staying hotels and just in general, everything has gone up that much that when it was looked at. This is a committee that does go down to our one sister city, Sylvania, Ohio. We're very active working together and enjoy meeting with them at least twice a year, if that answers that. Any other questions? Councillor Martin?
Thank you. Page 107. Can I get my name changed?
We actually did notice that and wondered if you might say that. So I was going to apologize to you after the meeting that I forgot to say that before the meeting. So yes, we will certainly make that name change. Any other questions? Anybody else want to change their name? No? Okay. Seeing none? All right, moving along. I wanted to touch on committees of council as well. So pages 108 and 109. We have a lot of great committees here in the city of Woodstock. They do great work, a lot of volunteers, and really to say thank you seems to be so minimal, but thank you. Thank you for them. Any questions on line items? Councillor Martin.
Thanks, Mayor Accioni. On both page 108 and 109, I do notice all of the committees were underspent in last year, and I think that's partially a first year of a new term, new representatives on each committee. I'm hopeful that with each committee, that if they do feel that their budget numbers are in excess of what they need, that they can come forward with recommendations, but that each committee comes up with a plan in January, we're already in February, in the beginning of the year, in the first quarter, for what their spending will be, so that we don't end up in October, November with unspent and a desire to spend the full budget when it might not all be needed. So.
Well said. Couldn't agree more. Yep. And I will make an add to that on page 109, the Youth Advisory Committee, for those wondering, it's in talks again. We're trying to see what could be done. Councillor Wismer Van Meer, Councillor Leatherborough, myself and staff, we've met, we've discussed different ideas, and hopefully we can get something going again with their help. So thank council for getting that going. Any other questions before we finish off this evening? Because I'm sure everybody is done. Okay, with that, I think we've got everything covered. So those watching at home, I'd like to say that the Police Services Board, Public Library Board, the Art Gallery Advisory Board will all be presenting their budgets at the regular meeting of council being held on March 7th. Final approval of the revenue budget is scheduled for the regular meeting of council on March 21st. Councilors are requested to forward their suggested amendments to council, the CAO, the city clerk, the Director of Administrative Services, and myself by March 14th, 2024. Amendments can, of course, be brought forward on council floor on March 21st as well, as always. Before we adjourn, I'd like to say a huge thank you to city staff. Before the meeting started, the clerk and I were talking, and I have a great opportunity to sit here, see city staff here in both these meeting nights. You're all here in your respective departments, and it means so much to council that we can ask a question and know you're here to answer those questions when really mean. But not only that, you ask them or answer them, I'm sorry, throughout the year. And for that, I'm very thankful. I'm very proud of our city staff. And want you to know it's definitely noticed that you've been here sitting in those less than comfortable benches. My butt's sore and I'm in a leather chair, so I can just imagine. Thank you so much to staff for being here. Please, again, council, send your messages off well in advance. Let's get all the information we can, especially before that March 21st meeting, and we'll have good discussions and vote on the final budget. With that, looking for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Leatherborough, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favor? We are adjourned, everybody. Thank you again. Good night.